and receive no compensation. We are appointed by the City Commission for staggered 3-year terms. Under state statutes, the BZA hears 3 types of appeals. We hear dimensional, use variances, and appeals of interpretations of rulings of the building official or other boards regarding the provision of the zoning ordinance. Tonight, we have 5 dimensional appeals. In a dimensional appeal, the appellant must show a practical difficulty complying with the dimensional requirements of the ordinance. It requires 4 affirmative votes, and as I said, all 5 tonight are dimensional. We do have a board of 6 members. You do need 4 out of 6. A full board would be 7 members. So we are short 1 member today. Our procedure is all comments to be addressed to myself, the chair. Please wait to be recognized. The city staff will then make a presentation regarding the appeal and take questions from the board members. The appellant is then invited to present their case. Only 1 person may speak on behalf of a particular appeal. I can make exceptions if there is an architect or an engineer that we have a question that needs to be answered. Members of the public are then invited to come forward, identify themselves, and provide their comments to the board. The hearing is then closed. Motions from the board are entertained and acted upon. In all cases, this is not a popularity contest. Granting or denying a variance is based substantially on the appellant meeting their burden of proof. If you are attending by Zoom, you can use the raise hand feature. So if you're attending by Zoom and you'd like to comment on one of the appeals at a time where we ask for public comment, you can use the raise hand feature. We will call upon you and unmute you. You'll state where you're calling from, tell us your comments about a particular appeal, and then we will remute you. If you're calling by phone, it's hard to tell, someone might be, you can hit *9 on your phone, and that will alert us that you want to speak, and then we will call upon you just as we do for Zoom. Can we please call the roll of the board members?
Eric Markinoff.
Here.
Jason Camerson.
Here.
Kevin Hart.
Here.
Bridget Lilly. John Miller. Ron Reddy.
Here.
Peter Yadler.
Here.
Carl Connor.
Here.
John McLaughlin.
Do we have anyone here for Appeal 2501 for 1511 East Maple? Thank you. Do we have someone here for Appeal 2504 for 225 East Maple? Thank you. Do we have someone here for Appeal 2505 for Lakeside? Thank you. Do we have someone here for Appeal 2506 for Villa? Thank you. And do we have someone here for 2507 for East Frank? Very good, thank you. Do we have any additional correspondence for the board?
We do not.
Very good. Before you, board members, you have the minutes from the last regularly scheduled Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. Do we have any adjustments and or a motion to approve them as written?
Move to approve.
You have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All not in favor? The minutes are approved. We will now call our first appeal. We have appeal number 2501 for 1511 East Maple, and the city will present.
Jeff Zilke here to present case 25-01, property known as 1511 East Maple. Requests the following variance regarding the front open space impervious requirements. This appeal was adjourned from last month's meeting, so they're back here in front of you tonight for a overage in the required front yard. So the variance chapter 126, Article 4.31A of the zoning ordinance requires that a minimum of 65% of the front yard open space in a single-family district shall be free of paved surfaces, which for this case is 2831.34 square feet. The initial proposal was to be at 53.70%, which is 23.39.12 square feet. Therefore, a variance of 11.30 feet or percent is being requested. Through some discussion and over the period from the last meeting, that request got reduced down to 6.20% overage, which is about a reduction of 250 square feet. And let me zoom in the best. If you remember from last time, and you can see where this area of the dirt is, all the way around from the original one. Let me go back to the front plan. So as this border actually ran around the driveway, the parking pad, and along the other side of the driveway, there was a reduction of 20 inches reduced all the way around on both sides of the driveway, bringing that square footage down for the request of 6.2% overage for the required front yard. Any questions?
So all the dirt you're showing on that screen are previous pavers, not grass?
Correct. I know due to the weather, and I'll let the appellant speak of it, he had his contractor over there that actually put it in. Through some discussions with them, it was reduced down, and they actually had the opportunity to pull it out prior to this meeting.
Very good. Please.
Mr. Zilke, I noticed in the package from the appellant that there's a letter here from the Veterans Administration. Does that have any bearing on what we're looking at tonight?
The removal of the square footage of the pavers, no.
Any other questions for Mr. Zilke? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Who's coming up to speak, please?
Good evening. My name is Jason Hurst. I'm property owner at 1511 East Maple. I'm here to request a variance for the impervious area of 6.2% overage of the 35%.
So maybe just give us a summary of what we were talking about before, and then please tell us what you changed and how you believe that was a, kind of your attempt to mitigate to the lowest, surface area or coverage that you could achieve why you need more than the ordinance allows for.
Absolutely. So we initially added the pavers to facilitate extra parking and allow to turn around in our parking pad to pull out onto East Maple, which many of you know is a very busy road. Backing onto the road, it creates not a hardship, but it's a dangerous situation when cars speeding, often not doing 35 miles an hour, exceeding the speed limit. Being able to pull out forward onto this street is safer for my family as well as other commuters utilizing that street. Being that we live on East Maple, being a busy street, we don't have street parking like you would in a subdivision, hence the parking pad. Previously, the parking pad did exist, but you were able to fit two cars closely together. You really couldn't get out. If you did get out, you were getting out into the grass or snow or ice. Currently, I have two small children, so as I pull them out of car seats, if the grass is wet, if it's icy, there is a potential for a fall risk. It was mentioned that I included my VA disability. I have hardware in my ankle, I have a bad back, bad knees. So this is a hardship for me. If I have to get out on icy ground and slip, I'm down for weeks. The reduction in the pavers, I talked to the contractor. We discussed, what could be done and still maintain the functionality of the pavers. It's not just aesthetics, it is functionality. So I had them remove the pavers. One of the nice days we had last week, I was able to get the guys out there and have them remove it.
So do any of the illustrations that you provided for this meeting show the areas where the pavers were removed? Or is it only, which page are you on there? 41? Oh, it's way
So
back.
initially there were 4 feet of pavers on either side. We have reduced that by 20 inches. So all the bare area, the strip, that was all removed.
Yeah. And what about that? The radius over there is still there, right? Well, that radius really is decorative, right? It's part of the
Yes,
parking pad.
that was due to cracked concrete.
Right,
So,
right. Very good. Any other comments?
that would be it.
Board members, questions for the appellant? Mr. Kempis.
Do you believe any additional pavers could be removed and still complete, and still function the way you intend it to be functioned?
No. If you take a look at the top left image, I purposely left my vehicle open with a door. You can see as I step out, I would be stepping out onto the pavers. Any reduction, and then we're back to where we were.
Thank you. That's at the garage though, right? Not the parking pad, or is that the parking pad?
That is the garage.
Right. You don't have an example of your car on the parking pad, or how many cars fit on the parking pad?
I do not.
This illustration where you show 3 different vehicles on the pad, though, can those, the way they're positioned, also have the doors open functionally, or is it just?
So
Did they
originally,
fit?
that original image was from last time we came in here, and we had the 4 feet of pavers on both sides. That was just an illustration done by our surveyor to show kind of, we can fit 3 cars in there. We have a big family, everyone wants to come over for the new house. We've been displaced for a while, so we owe several holiday dinners, so we're going to have a lot of people over. With the reduction, we can get 2 cars with, open doors comfortably.
Very good. So you could, I guess you'd also say that if one car was parked there and another car needed to turn into that spot to then back towards the garage, you could come out head first.
Exactly.
It would function for that purpose too.
So in lieu of all this, when I was taking the pictures, I did a couple 3-point turns. From where my vehicle was stationed, if I had a car parked in that parking spot, I do have enough room to get out. So it is functional.
Very good. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. In the you're good. Thanks. In the audience or online, meaning Zoom or phone, does anybody have a comment about this particular appeal? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Board members,
Mr. Chair,
please.
I'd like to make a motion, please. With regards to Appeal 25-01, the property known as 1511 East Maple, I would move to approve Variance A. My reasoning for this is that I do think there's some special conditions that are applicable to this particular property. My recollection of the facts is that the contractor for the appellant put this driveway in without obtaining a permit. The appellant has made an effort, based on our recommendations from last month, to reduce the request of the variance by approximately half. I do think that little enforcement of the chapter here would result in an unnecessary hardship. I don't think granting of the variance would be contrary to the spirit of the zoning ordinance, particularly in this case. I also think that there would be substantial justice to both the appellant and to the general public if this motion was approved.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? We have Mr. Kona. We have a second. Any discussion? Please.
I just want to thank the petitioner for putting up with us last month and our questions and going back and putting in the effort and mitigating the request. I think that showed that was important here, so I'll support the motion.
I'll support the motion. I think a factor for our board, because the ordinance really is intended to allow for only so much, the percentages that were identified in the initial overview of the ordinance. But this lot is unique in that it does back into Maple Road. And so because the lot and the width of the driveway would typically have the petitioner have to back into the road, it's a dangerous thing. It's dangerous whether you have kids or you don't have kids. And so the board looks at these particular circumstances specific to the site and say, is it reasonable because of the property, because of the risk, to allow for additional flat work, additional non-pervious material to allow for the safety of the owners, whether it be this owner or any future owner. So in this case, we've determined that it is, but specifically because of that need. In addition, having parking on the property, which is not necessarily something that the ordinance allows for, but because there may be a vehicle parked on the driveway and one has to maneuver around it while still having to be able to get out of the driveway without blindly backing out, that's the reason I'm supporting this. And the mitigation of reducing it down to 2 spots, because anything more than that would not really fall within this unique situation of safety. I'm glad the petitioner listened and did that, and I think it was reasonable. So for that reason, I will support the motion. Can we please call the roll? The case 2501, a motion to approve.
Ron Ready,
Yes.
Carl Kona,
Yes.
Jason Canvassar,
Yes.
Kevin Hart,
Yes.
Eric Morgan,
Yes.
Peter Yalda.
Yes.
And just because, I want to note that just because the site plan doesn't really reflect this final design, but the city will be responsible to ensure that the square footage that is approved is reviewed and confirmed after the final install. Congratulations, you have your variance.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Our next case is 25-04 for 225 East Maple Road.
Just catching my bearings really quick. Let's go here. All right. My name is Nick Dupuy. I'm the planning director for the city of Birmingham. You may be used to seeing my former colleague, Brooks Cowan, who has moved on from the city. So expect to see a few more of us from the planning department from time to time. For those of you I haven't met, nice to meet you. For the regulars, hello again. So I am presenting for this appeal 2504 for 225 East Maple, otherwise known as Social Kitchen and Bar. There are two very specific requests from the appellant today relating to an existing pre-existing legal nonconforming outdoor dining facility here in downtown Birmingham. The first variance that they're requesting is relating to the enclosure system. The new proposed enclosure system which would be reintroducing a prohibited facet of outdoor dining facilities. And the second one relating to the outdoor dining seats, which our ordinance currently caps at 65. I'll provide a little bit more detail on both here in a moment. So the reason this is here in the first place is because it's considered a significant renovation. I've mentioned before it's pre-existing legal nonconforming. You can walk by tonight and see it. It's out there. It's been operating in basically its same form for a little over 10 years now. The early 2010s it was approved. So back then we didn't explicitly prohibit enclosures. In 2018 we did update our ordinance to specifically prohibit enclosures. And that was done generally to promote the intent of outdoor dining at the time, which was to create a really active and engaging street, which is generally a goal of our master plans and things like that. So, as I mentioned, the current facility, it's got an angled roof, it's a vinyl fabric, it's got roll-down isinglass panels, which does create this enclosure system. It contains currently between that area and the rooftop 86 outdoor dining seats, where the current definition of bistro caps outdoor dining seats at 65. So related to the enclosure specifically, it's 723 square feet of new enclosure system that they're proposing. The definition of enclosure specifically relates to the wall portion, not the roof or I'll call it the knee wall or the barrier that comes up 42 inches. Everything between the roof and that barrier is what's considered an enclosure. And then, I guess to wrap up, in relation to the seats, I mentioned in my report that we advertised it as a variance for 21. They had, in discussions with the appellant, now reduced the ask to requesting a variance of 11. So they'd be going from 86 total to 76 total, again, where the ordinance requires a 65-seat maximum. And I guess to close on this, actually, this did have to go to the planning board for a recommendation, as it is a special land use permit. One of the approval conditions was that they petitioned for a variance, so that's why we're here. They do still have to gain approval from the city commission, regardless of this hearing this evening. And the final decision on the special land use permit will be, it's scheduled for March 24th. So with that, I know the appellant team is here. I'm, of course, open to questions should you have any, but kick it back to you.
So when you said they had 85 when there was no ordinance prohibiting these structures, was there any ordinance on how big outdoor structure, or how many seats an outdoor structure could have? Was 85 the limit at that time?
Thank you for the question, and good clarification. That was also formally not defined. So previously, it would say something like, and I'm not quoting an old definition or paraphrasing an old definition, but bistros were always kept at 65 inside. The addition in 2018 was 65 outside. So previously, it wasn't defined and was uncapped.
Would it be based on square footage? Would there be any limitation on what you could put inside a structure, or there was just no limitation?
Just basic public health, safety, welfare limitations and clear path, 5-foot clear path limitations, but otherwise, no, not technically.
Our next question, for parking, are they under the parking district, or do they have to supply spots for these 76 new spots or the current 86 spots?
Sure. Their footprint is within the former parking assessment district. So as a commercial use, you do not have to supply parking.
And even if they have this bistro outside at 65 or more, there's no impact on parking for them?
There's no zoning ordinance impact on parking. I wouldn't venture to say there's no impact on parking because that's cars and spots, but zoning ordinance-wise, no.
Can you identify other non-conforming legal structures that fit the same criteria currently functioning in the city of Birmingham?
I would say there's only one that meets more of an apples-to-apples comparison at Market North End, up at 456-ish North Old Woodward. I say apples-to-apples more because it's a similar material in the isinglass material, the roll-down panels that they can come up and down, and it does exist on public property. The only other two examples of Casa Pernoi is on private property, and back in, forgive me, I forget the year, but several years ago, when they received their variance, it was based on the lack of work being done to that structure and more about a reformatting of their seats. And then finally, Bistro Joe's, which contains the same isinglass clear vinyl panels. The difference being it is on private property and is up at the mezzanine level. So it's, not apples to apples, but.
And to clarify, isinglass, even though the phrase has glass in it, it's really a vinyl product that simulates windows.
Correct.
Have any of the other three that you identified ever asked to either renovate or tear down and rebuild their structures?
No, not in the sense that I believe you're asking. So besides the Casa Pernoi variance, which rearranged the seats a little bit, the structure itself was not proposed to be renovated at that time.
Okay, and let's talk about, so specifically to social, you said the structure is not property they own, it's leased by the city, correct?
It's leased from the city.
And is that a yearly, a 10-year lease? What is that typically?
Yep, outdoor dining permits are an annual permit, and every year, a lease figure gets calculated based on the current market value of the land, the square footage you have, et cetera, and the number of months that you're going to be having it. So every year, they enter into an outdoor dining lease agreement with the city.
And if they were able to buy the land from the city, which I'm not saying they could, what would they be able to build an outside structure with windows that would hold 65 seats that would not require a variance?
If it's outdoor dining, the answer would be no. They could build a permanent structure that's indoor dining. They'd have to rework the inside to make the other interior maximums work. But if it's outdoor dining, the issue would still persist. Whether you're on public or private land, enclosures are prohibited.
So if I build an outside structure and I have windows that I pull out in the summer, or I have garage doors that go up, is that considered outside seating, or is that just considered creative architecture?
Sure. Or say like French doors or nano walls,
Right.
that type of thing. We would consider that indoor dining. An example I can think of is Zana. Recently did French doors, and they can basically open that whole front protruding area. It's considered indoor space.
So if you have the ability to build something, you wouldn't need a variance. You could make it somewhat indoor-outdoor if you had the piece of land to do it and whatnot.
If all the other ducks fell in a row, yes.
Very good. Other questions please, Mr. Canvassar.
Yeah, a couple questions here. So in regards to variance A, that's request because they're proposing to tear it out and build a new structure, correct?
Correct.
What is the requirement for renovation? Is it 50%, 75%? What's the calculation there?
Sure. General nonconformity ordinance suggests that 75%, and that's, damage or removal. So if you think of it literal, if you take 3/4 of it away, you're triggering that nonconformity and you have to meet code. We do have our separate nonconformity section in our outdoor dining provisions that does say you can maintain it or repair it. You just can't replace or renovate.
Half 75% or?
I think that's the standard we would use. That's a general nonconformity standard.
Okay. So as long as they kept 25% of the structure, they could potentially do it
Well, the
different.
non-conforming structure can't be expanded or enlarged, okay, without a variance. You know, renovations, and Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not as familiar with the outdoor dining ordinance on there. But if, you know, in this case, you could paint, you could do things like that and renovate that. But if any portion of the nonconformity deteriorates to the point to where it needs to be replaced, that's when we're going to apply the 75%.
All right, I'll certainly, we'll ask the petitioner whether or not this is an issue of aesthetics or necessity of maintenance. All right. In regards to the second variance, variance B, if they remove the structure entirely, there's still options to have that same level of seating, but they would need to require a variance if they're over that outdoor dining threshold, right? They could have seating if the city allowed them to use that space without a cover, or they could take parking spots like we see in the summer, correct? But they would still need a variance for that excess seating because they have the rooftop, right?
I would agree with that, because the other provision in the outdoor dining ordinance is when the nonconformity is erased, you have to come into conformance with the outdoor dining ordinance and all other applicable codes and ordinances. So because the bistro definition caps the number of bistro seats at 65, we're suggesting that that's an applicable code or ordinance that they now have to come into conformance with. So they couldn't just, forgive me, they
No, that's
couldn't
all right.
just like remove the enclosure and still, I guess, exist with the 86 seats.
Because they have 30 on the rooftop.
30 and 56 would be the breakdown.
Okay. So they could have 26 without a variance as long as they had the city lease.
If that's the math. So if there's 30 on the rooftop, they could have 35 in that space. So it's capped at 65. Yes.
Sorry. Okay. Thank you.
Of course.
Ready?
What's the purpose of limiting bistro sitting to 65 people?
Well, I'll have to take you to the Wayback Machine, which I've been here for about 8 years, but my intuition in that regard is that we always want bistros, we always imagine bistros to be a more smaller, eclectic establishment that didn't necessarily have the ability to compete with the larger Class Cs. Because Class C is, non-bistro licenses, you can have any amount of interior seats and any amount of exterior seats. Because at the time they viewed them very differently, they wanted to ensure that those establishments stayed really small. There was also other instances for bistros that, I guess, unexpectedly took it a little far, and you got to the 80s and 90s seats, and it just didn't end up being a really good urban condition. So at a certain point, they decided, hey, for ease, to keep them small, to keep them eclectic, let's cap it at 65.
Thank you.
Of course.
Following along the same line, the bistro definition by itself requires the outdoor seating. To get the license, you require outdoor seating?
Yeah, and a friendly correction, it doesn't really exist in the definition. It would exist in, say, the overlay in this case, in terms of what's required to be a bistro, and outdoor dining is required, a requirement of a bistro, to have some level of outdoor dining.
Okay, so along those lines, it's not necessarily, because the unique situation of this facility, they could accommodate the entire requirement on the roof.
65, you're saying?
No, just the required outdoor seating.
All the required outdoor bistro seating, they wouldn't even need this structure, and they could still, from the space that's shown, it appears that they could easily fit all the required seats without having anything on the street level.
Sure, I would suggest, I would answer it this way. They would meet the minimum requirements of being a bistro by having any level of outdoor dining. So in your example, yes, the 30 seats on the roof constitute the satisfactory outdoor dining, I suppose. You could have, to be extreme, you could have a bistro and have 2 seats outside it, a little two-top out front, and technically meet it. Now, is that what we'd like? No, not necessarily, but to answer your question in that long-winded way, yes.
Okay, and my understanding of the bistro when it was first introduced, I thought the whole intent was to bring the street environment outside, make that connection so you're not like just walking by a restaurant, you're walking by people outside eating. And so putting it all on the roof is unique in that they have all that space. So they could accommodate the outdoor seating requirement, but it doesn't have to be on the ground?
It doesn't necessarily have to be. I think you're correct, and our intent was to activate the street level space. And we do that a number of ways, both with outdoor dining, but also as a bistro, you're required to put tables in the storefronts on the inside so that you have that engagement there as well.
Okay. And also, so you mentioned something earlier about the outdoor tables. And so if they completely eliminated this structure, and several other bistros have just tables with umbrellas out in front of they have a situation where there's a large sidewalk, so they can put tables. They don't need street usage. They can just put them in front of their facility. And I'm thinking about like the Mad Hatter had it at one point. I can't remember. There's another one that had enough space that they could put tables out with just an umbrella, and they could accommodate their the seating requirements that way as well, couldn't they?
Yeah, there's lots of places like that. Churchill's does that. That's a bistro.
The Italian restaurant on the corner down from
Yep,
Churchill's.
Sal's and
Yeah.
Lux, even
Phoenicia.
EM and Market have a
Okay.
little bit on the sidewalk as well.
And one other question, are there any other bistros that have a variance for overseating?
So I don't recall any variances for overseating, but there are certainly bistros that have more than 65. And I'm only thinking of one right now, and it's Townhouse. I believe, I guess I wouldn't say any other ones for fear of being incorrect, but I know that Townhouse is in the 80 range. And I think that's probably, between those two and maybe a handful of others, the only ones. And they're all pre-existing legal nonconformities.
Okay, thank you very much.
So back to another question. So if they rebuilt this structure with the knee wall, with the roof, with a corner post, but did not put in the isinglass, they would not need a variance, correct?
That's my argument. You not need variance. You of course need to update the special land use permit and all the other stuff. But it's
And
exactly
get down to
that.
65 seats.
Right. That's
But it's the isinglass that, the ability to use this year-round with space heaters, for lack of a better term, because I've been inside of this space with, freestanding heaters. So it's the isinglass that is what triggers it. Let's go back to the seating. So if they renovated and didn't take it down more than 75%, they wouldn't need to come back for a variance for the number of tables. They would still be grandfathered in. Is that correct?
I would agree with that at this time. Yes.
Any other question?
What are the benefits generally of prohibiting just a blanket prohibition on enclosures? I guess what went into that? What can you share about why that might have been done and what the city was thinking?
Sure. And because zoning is so nuanced and these one-size-fits-all solutions are generally hard sometimes, most of it was to encourage the activity. So not only seeing people, but hearing it and feeling it, close as you walk by, as you engage in that public space. There was also an idea that, if we didn't prohibit it, that you could start getting those visual barriers as well, which we didn't want either. So it all goes back to activity, just wanting to have that.
I'm just imagining there must have been some discussion of what happens during the winter when it's cold and how businesses cope with that. I was curious about that.
There's certainly been some considerations, and what I should tell you is that for many, many years, we had a very defined outdoor dining season, which was from April 1 to November 15th. That's it. So, you'll have to forgive me, I'm not sure exactly when that was adopted. Which it doesn't necessarily matter. We recently updated it in 2023 and extended it from April 1st to December 31st, because we think, thank you, climate change, I guess. And that's for Most outdoor dining facilities, except if you've got one on the sidewalks, you can elect to have them out in January, February, March, should you choose to. You'll still have to lease them for the appropriate amount of money and maintain the space. But effectively, it was a post-COVID decision. We thought, should a restaurant be able to or want to, that they should have at least have access to year-round outdoor dining, should they be able to. It was a very much post-COVID ordinance.
Thank you.
But they also, as COVID, wherever it ended, they didn't allow for those outside structures that were built to accommodate outdoor dining, like Bella Piatti had one. They required them to take it down. So those weren't grandfathered in. They were allowed solely for the purpose of COVID, and they were required to remove them.
Yep, because the story behind that is for a very brief period, maybe a year, we actually adopted a stopgap, brand-new zoning ordinance that basically eliminated all those rules to accommodate, the COVID requirements. Then we quickly, put a new rule in place to make sure that we both considered the effects of COVID, but also, drew it back a little bit, because some of them did get rather large.
Very good. Any other questions?
Just one more. The appellant listed in the hardship letter that there's 3 bistros that are looking to do renovations, and they were listed. And the question is, do any of these have enclosures or overseating requests?
So the answer would be no. None of these have enclosed outdoor dinings. I should note that only the first one, Bell Bistro, is a bistro. Not that it matters, because as I said before, if it's outdoor dining, it can't be enclosed. So it doesn't matter if you're a full class C or not.
Okay.
That would only matter in regards to seats. Sprazzo and Hazel's are not seat limited.
Okay.
And is the appellant aware that 75% is the criteria that we're stating is the renovation without requiring a variance? Is that a discussion you've had with them?
Sure. So I don't think so, frankly, but I suppose I would kick it to them to ask that question to make sure they understand.
Very
I don't
good.
think we've had it so directly, perhaps.
Any other questions?
One final quick question,
Please.
Mr. Chairman. I'm a bit confused. Variance B is requesting 21, but in your staff notes, that would be, 86? In your staff notes, it's 76? Is it 76 that they're requesting, 11 over?
That's correct. So that the 21 was what we noticed, and after working with them and suggesting to them that it's always a good idea to mitigate your request, they did try to accommodate us a little bit, and they took it down 10.
So the
request is 11.
Any potential motion would be for, not for 21, it would be for 11. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Seeing none, who's coming to discuss this appeal?
Chairman, members of the board, my name is Jacob Newman. I'm here representing Social Kitchen and Bar. What I'd like to emphasize...
Give us your business address, please.
225 East Maple Street.
Thank you.
What I'd like to emphasize are the unique circumstances. The property's current patio represents unique circumstances that prevent strict compliance with the updated zoning ordinance. The existing patio is legal non-conforming use. Originally approved under previous regulations, it serves as a critical extension of the restaurant's dining space and contributes to its functionality and appeal. The proposed improvements are designed to address safety, energy efficiency, and aesthetic concerns without altering the patio's footprint or the current function. Nick, if it's possible, could we get a picture of the current patio structure?
Just tell me when to stop if you see it before me. You want to use the sliders?
Yeah, if you use the second slider, Nick.
Oh, this here?
This is going to showcase what the current patio system looks like. You referenced the 75%. For the business owner, it was a non-starter. Based on the isinglass that's there right now, the current wall structure, the project has to be a complete tear down and rebuild. What you can see in the renderings is we're making a huge upgrade to the space aesthetically without changing what the footprint itself is. The usage of the area is going to remain exactly the same. The business is going to invest in the area for the aesthetic upgrade. The system that we're utilizing, it's a custom application, structure framing with a polycarbonate roof. We're also upgrading the sides from isinglass to a grade 3 marine grade strata-glass. To give you an idea of the quality of the product, the framework is Structure. As I stated, Structure nationally is partnered with locations like Ruth Chris, Ritz-Carlton, Hyatt, Hilton, Four Seasons. It is a really high-end commercial grade brand. It will add aesthetically to the space, again, without moving away from its current function that's legal non-conforming.
So you heard the questions from the board to the city. You heard the challenges as you hear the questions, right? Which is, you could build this structure. I don't think any of us would debate that it's not beautiful, more beautiful than what's there now, would probably function better. But what I also hear the board members saying, which is, no one else in the city has a non-conforming structure they've been able to tear down and rebuild. There are many places in the city where if they had the ability to build from scratch and build an outdoor structure with isinglass, they would like to do it to expand their outdoor seating and make it year-round, but they aren't allowed to. And so when someone comes in front of this board and says, I saw you gave, this obviously is hypothetical, social the ability to go down to the floor, tear out the floor, re-pour it, and build a structure, what was so unique about them that they were able to do it and we're not? And the answer can't be, well, they had it before and it was non-conforming, so we just figured we can let them redo it. So we're looking solely at the ordinance, which we're here to enforce. What's so special about this piece of land? Because it's not about the restaurant, it's about the land. What's so special about the land that's unique that you can't do what the ordinance allows for, which is renovate it? You don't need our permission to do that, up to how the city allows for it. Tear it down and rebuild it without the isinglass, which clearly you don't want to do. And then if you do make a renovation that's extreme and or renovate it, you aren't going to have the seating that you currently allow for. So I get it's a non-starter for the owner, but if he's going to lose the seating, I assume it's a he, but let's say if they can't remove it without losing the seating and not having the isinglass, my guess is they won't be tearing it down. So we're here to determine what is unique about this property, not how beautiful it will be, not how much we love social, not about the chocolate chip cookies, but what's unique about this particular site that allows social to do it, but nobody else in the city of Birmingham can. That's what we have to hear.
I think the argument would be that each one of these cases is going to be seen and heard on a case-by-case basis, right? What you can see, the area essentially, because the isinglass that was installed, it's become an eyesore. Right? So Social Bar and Kitchen, with no financial backing from the city, is going to invest close to $250,000 to upgrade the aesthetic of the space, right? Other than asking for the variance, they're not asking for any additional help from the city. They're going to invest in the aesthetic and upgrading the appearance of the area.
Right, but the city commission has decided that outdoor seating enclosed with isinglass isn't allowed. That's a decision they've already made. We aren't here to change the ordinance. We aren't empowered to change the ordinance. You're asking us to give you a variance because you can't meet the ordinance. But I've yet to hear why you can't meet the ordinance.
The space is legal non-conforming, right? So if we don't make the upgrade, what's currently there will stay, right? We all agree that what we're going to upgrade it to is a huge, huge improvement aesthetically. The reason that we cannot alter it with what you're saying is we need the strata glass on the sides to make the seating year-round. We need to be able to have the heaters in there, the walls that can retract up and down, so the bistro can utilize the space and the extra seating so they can continue to function as they are.
Right, but the year-round function is not allowed by the ordinance of the city of Birmingham. So social is very special in that they have the ability to have it, that they're non-conforming, and if they, and again, I'm first today hearing that 75% is the threshold. It sounds like maybe you haven't heard that, and I'd be excited if I were you and I heard that, but you have the ability to make it, to renovate it without losing it, which I think is amazing, because no one else can build one, and you have it, and you're unique in that you have it, and that if I want to go in and it's kind of a cold day, but I want to be somewhere and have a Bloody Mary, you have the ability to do that in ways that many of the other establishments in Birmingham don't. So again, I'll move on to other people that ask questions, but the challenge I'm having is if you take it down to 0, I'm going to have people coming in from all over the city saying, we want one too. Questions for the appellant?
So I'm just thinking about what makes this property different than some of the other properties that have outdoor seating areas, whether they're closed or not. Like this property sits in an alleyway, and I'm just curious if that has some impact on you guys wanting outdoor enclosure. Do you know if other bistros in the city are sitting in an alleyway like that, or does that play any role in you guys wanting it enclosed? And I guess just curious what you think about that.
That I can't speak to, Nick. I know we cited other examples. I mean, is anyone else going to be in an alleyway like?
Sure, so there are two others that I can think of on the spot. Dick O'Dow's, which is not a bistro, by the way, but it's still outdoor dining. So again, outdoor dining does matter. There's also a new bistro coming that was approved. It's called Bloom Bistro, at least it was right now, at 239 North Old Woodward, where the old Pita Cafe was. They'll also have outdoor dining in the rear in the alley. It's not there yet, and neither of which are enclosed. But those are the only two I could really think of.
So in those examples, if they were renovated, if they built these outdoor structures and they were not allowed to have isinglass, because he's saying they're not enclosed, they may have heaters, I don't know if that's allowed or not, and then we allow you to tear down, rebuild, and put isinglass in, then wouldn't it be reasonable for them to come and say, Social did it, we have all the same factors, why can't we? And then we would say, go back to the city commission, it's not allowed. Okay, well, it wasn't allowed, why did you allow it? And I don't have the ability to say, well, because this site it was unique, and so you don't have what they have. So again, the criteria, which I'm sure they provided for a variance, requires you to demonstrate what's unique about this. What's the justice for you as a business in Birmingham, but what's the justice to the neighboring businesses? What's the value that it brings to the city besides for you? And my argument would be there is no justice to your neighbors if you have something they can't have, even though you currently have something they can't have. And that just happens to have because you're non-conforming, but you're legal non-conforming. If you go down to zero and you rebuild it, you're trying to build a non-conforming structure. We don't allow non-conforming structures in the city. So that's the challenge I'm having.
I agree. I think the biggest thing we have going in our favor is we're going to maintain the current footprint, right? You're talking about what good it's going to do for the area. The current patio and cover, it's an eyesore for the area, right? I guess if we were to look at the definition of variance, that's why we're up here applying, right? We want to do something special that's outside the code. All we're asking to do is to maintain exactly what we have. We just want to upgrade the space.
I mean, I would argue that everything that's non-conforming in the city, it's non-conforming because the city intends for it to eventually get so old that it gets torn down and never built again. I think that's kind of what I perceive non-conforming means. They're beautiful as they are, but at some point you can't expand upon them. They are non-conforming. At some point they get replaced. I think that whether it's a beautiful home that'll take 80 years to be replaced, but if you can't meet the ordinance, you can't, if someone comes in here with a home and says, I have a non-conforming home and I want to expand it, we don't allow that for the same purposes. Other questions?
Mr. Chair?
Please, Mr. Ray.
Sir, the way I understand it is, according to the city, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, that you could conceivably do 75% of what you're asking for, so that would be approximately 500 square feet that would be conforming. We're not talking about seating here, we're just talking about reconstruction of the outdoor space.
Sorry.
Is that
Once they tear it out, it removes, they have to keep 75% of the existing structure. Once they tear it out.
That's my apologies. See, that answered the question.
I
Thank you.
think the board may be confusing renovating and repairing or maintaining. Non-conforming structures are allowed to exist as long as they're properly maintained. We could get into all kinds of debates about what's maintenance and what's renovation. In the non-conforming section of an ordinance, I'll use an example of, if a non-conforming building is destroyed more than 75% of its current replacement cost or cash value, I forget what it says at that time, it can't be rebuilt without a variance.
Okay, thank you. I was frankly, I was confused on that. I wasn't sure what the 75% stood for, so that clarified it. Sorry, thank you.
Any other comments on your end or any questions? Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hurd.
I guess the unique circumstances about this particular structure is, it's on an alleyway. It's not adjacent to a street. It's open in the winter. I've been there several times when there's snow on the ground. I noticed that when the alley is plowed, the snow piles up against that canvas base. Your new proposal shows masonry along the base that would protect it from I guess that to me is kind of a unique feature about this, is that you're trying to mitigate something that's a problem. You know, there's a life cycle on that canvas type structure. I guess what the board, what I'm hearing and my colleagues saying is that we're not really hearing what is the difficulty, what's the hardship of not of leaving it like it is. We need for you to tell us what are some of the hardships that are requiring this, not just, and it can't be aesthetics. That's one of the things that we all try to not to consider that. I mean, we're not supposed to consider that, although this is a beautiful structure, obviously. But that being said, we need to know what is the hardship. Why is this being required? It probably could be explained better by you or by your staff, or how this is maintained, how it works, how it doesn't work. Some of the safety issues, some of egress issues, doors swinging out into an alley versus swinging in, path of egress, things like that we haven't really heard that might help us to understand why this would be a hardship.
I would pivot right to maintenance and wear and tear. Right, if you look at what the current structure is doing, it is starting to rot. Right, the isinglass that was in there at the time, that I understand is also now non-conforming, that we're upgrading. You can see the yellowing of it. If you've been to the area, you've seen, right? Eventually, the structure will rot and have to be torn down.
Any other questions?
Go ahead, Pierre. This might be duplicative of some of the questions that were being asked, but in addition to there being the hardship that you were just discussing, there has to be special conditions applicable to this property that are not applicable to other properties in the same zone, which I guess would be either other restaurants or other bistros. So you got to tell me how this property is different than other properties, so that those other properties don't come to the zoning board and ask for a zoning variance based simply on the fact that we gave you one. So there's got to be something setting this property apart from others, and so I'm struggling to know what that is. I just want to ask if there is something we could point to that would set this property apart.
I would point to the current existing legal non-conforming structure. Can the other properties say that they are going to utilize the exact same space that they have and upgrade the current footprint?
I don't know, yeah.
Because all we're asking is to maintain the exact footprint of what's there right now. We want to use what's legal non-conforming. We just want to be able to upgrade the space.
Assuming it wasn't, if we forgot that aspect for a second, is there something different about the shape of this property that makes it more deserving of having an enclosed area? Does it make sense here more than it might make sense at other restaurants for some reason? And I don't know exactly what those restaurants look like. I'm familiar with, I think, most of them, but I'm just curious if you might know how some of those restaurants are different.
We could point to the location, right? It's right in the heart of downtown Birmingham. We could point to the alleyway, which I believe is unique.
Thank you.
Mr. Cohen, you have another question?
Yeah, and I guess it's more to focus in on the specific issue. Doing the upgrade, I think, would be phenomenal. It would look fantastic. I think everybody agrees on that. I guess the question that we're stuck on is, what is the hardship that requires you to put the isinglass in?
If there's not going to be an isinglass wall, the bistro will not be able to seat year-round.
Right, but none of the bistros can seat it year-round either. That's the part we're struggling with. That's what's required, and so.
That's the nonconformity.
Right, so the issue is beautiful structure, nice upgrade, it'll look fantastic. Why, what's the hardship that you need the glass?
Because we currently have it, right? The restaurant, the bistro currently utilizes that space year-round.
Right, we understand all that, we understand it. So we're trying to figure out why you have a requirement or a hardship that needs glass that nobody else can get.
May I, gentlemen?
You can't, no. Sorry, it's only one person that can speak on behalf.
I mean, I would point right to lost revenue. I mean, if you're talking about losing, potentially 50-plus seats for the bistro, I mean, if that's not a hardship, I'm not sure what is. I mean, the bistro utilizes the space year-round, and all they're asking to do is maintain the current footprint. They want to upgrade it for the city. I mean, the hardship, I mean, I would point right to the lost revenue. If they weren't able to utilize that space year-round, I mean, you're talking about 4 to 5 months out of the year where they don't have 50-plus seats per day.
Any other questions?
Is the outdoor enclosed area original to the build-out of the restaurant? I guess that's simply yes or no. Is it original to the restaurant build-out? And I guess I'm trying to figure out whether the restaurant was designed for the purpose of having that year-round outdoor seating. Obviously, it was legal at the time.
Nick, do you know when it was installed? Because I know when it was installed, obviously, it was conforming to code.
Yeah, the structure is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess then it goes without saying that the outdoor seating was a critical component of the design of the remainder of the restaurant, basically.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. If I could add, and I'm sure you can confirm this. I was at I remember the grand opening of this location, and that was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that it's relevant. I mean, it could be relevant in your mind of whether or not you want to make that a part of your decision-making, but the key is that it was approved when it was approved. In 2018, they removed the ability to have enclosed outdoor spaces. Social must have an outdoor space, so they're doing what they're supposed to do, but it's also achieved by the rooftop area. It's also achieved by this area. So if they built this beautiful structure and did not enclose it with the, for lack of a better term, the vinyl window enclosure, they would not need a variance. The variance is because they want to tear down an existing non-conforming structure, rebuild a enclosed year-round structure that functions for outdoor and indoor, and the city doesn't allow that. And they don't allow it for any other bistro or any other restaurant in the city of Birmingham. And if they tear it down, the question is, if they rebuild it because they have it now, then establishing an existing non-conforming ordinance is useless unless we decide there's something unique about this that we believe provides for a variance. And that's what you've been asking for, and we have the testimony, so now we have to make a decision.
Understood.
Why don't we hear from the public?
Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
And by the way, I think all your arguments are reasonable from your perspective, just we have to go by the ordinance.
Understood.
In the audience, someone who's not specifically affiliated with this appeal that would like to comment on this appeal? Anybody on Zoom? I don't see anyone. I don't see any raised hands. We'll close public appeal or public comment. Gentlemen, discussion and/or motion?
Motion, then discussion.
I mean, is there a discussion or a motion? Yeah.
So there's only 3 or 4.
We need a
Yeah.
motion, then we need to discuss.
Oh, we can't discuss without a motion? Okay.
Motion.
Forgive me.
Motion, then
I'll
discussion.
wait a motion.
All right, please.
Someone wants to make a motion.
Someone have a motion?
I'd like to get a question answered. I don't know if that's possible to do, Mr.
I guess you
Chairman.
could make a motion and then ask the question after the motion. I mean, whatever your question is, it leans towards one or the other, I assume.
Sure. I'll go out on a limb. Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion with respect to appeal number 25-04. Do I have the right one there?
You do.
225 East Maple. I would move to approve the variance request, both A and B, and tie it to the plans. I believe there's a very limited number of bistros in the city, limited enough that each bistro is in itself a highly unique operation and property. They're not similar to houses where you might have 1,000 houses in the city, 50 or 100 on one street that might have similar characteristics. Every bistro in the city has a unique shape on a property that's likely very unique. This one happens to be sitting in a uniquely shaped alleyway. and was designed for the purpose of having an enclosed seating area. I think that the properties are unique enough, or the bistros that I'm aware of are unique enough where each bistro could still be looked at on a case-by-case basis, and that a determination that one should be entitled to have an enclosed area because of where it happens to be sitting within the city of Birmingham would not necessarily imply that all bistros should have one. Again, the shapes of all those properties are very different. The building characteristics are very different. And it's in the interest of the city to cause the downtown areas to be maintained in a first-class, beautiful manner. So I do believe that there are some special conditions applicable to the property that are a little easier to find when there aren't 100 or so competing bistros that might be asking for the same thing. Specifically, the shape of the property, its location relative to downtown, the fact that it's sitting in an alleyway. Literal enforcement will result in an unnecessary hardship because of the fact that at some point this dilapidated structure is going to need to be taken down if a variance isn't granted, and that would fundamentally change the purpose for which the restaurant was built, and it would have to require a redesign of the entire restaurant to accommodate the operation. Because of that, I don't believe that the granting of the variance is contrary to the spirit and purpose of the zoning ordinance. There were some statements made on the record that it is the intent of the ordinance not to allow bistros to get, I guess, insufficiently large to the point that they become obnoxious. This is already an existing operation. There's no request to expand it or include additional seating. The petitioner demonstrated that they were willing to reduce the variance requested to, I believe, 76, or forgive me if I have the number wrong. And because of the manner in which the enclosure has been designed, it appears likely to result in substantial justice to the property owner, to the neighbors, to city, to the invitees, all the people that are likely to visit this and drive by it every day, and will help the city maintain its character as a really beautiful, walkable downtown city. So for that reason, I would make a motion to approve the variance and tie it to the plans.
We have a motion to approve. We need a second.
I'll second.
All right, any discussion? Mr. Canvaser.
Go ahead. Oh, you can go first.
Yeah, I can't support this. Mainly, I don't see the special conditions. I could see that they could replace the structure, not put the glass in. I don't see any hardship of not building this the way it's shown in this picture right that we're looking at that has no glass in it. It's a beautiful upgrade, and the structure could be put in place without the glass, and I don't see any hardship for not putting it in. The fact that none of the other bistros are given this opportunity to enclose and have year-round seating is kind of a disadvantage. So to me, that is a substantial injustice to the surrounding property owners. So for those reasons, I can't support this.
Yeah, I'm also not going to support this motion. I mean, candidly and frankly, I'd love to see the structure built. I think it's a huge upgrade. It's beautiful. It looks great. It's just not part of the ordinance. I think the petitioner has other avenues if they're dead set on having that enclosure. It could be through a change to the bistro ordinance, for one. But they could remove the structure, which is non-conforming, and our non-conforming view is to remove non-conformities. If the city intended to allow them, it would not be a non-conforming use. So I think it was said during the course of discussion that, non-conformities have a life, and then when they're done, they're done. So I think by the virtue of the fact that it's non-conforming, if it's at the end of its life, then it needs to be removed. But again, I'd love to see the structure built in some capacity. I think it would look great. So I can't get behind the motion, but I would say that understanding the intent, the fact that this business has been here for a substantial amount of time, I could get potentially behind a different variance that just sought additional seating to support, the economic issue, although we're not really supposed to take economics into play. But given the fact that they've been there for so long and have a certain level of seating, I certainly could get behind requested to maintain that. But given the fact that they could keep the current structure, they can, I don't know if I want to use the term renovate it, but they can maintain it, and they have a bunch of options here. I think the variance is just something I can't support.
Yeah, the motion as presented, I also cannot support. I mean, the vague description of what makes it unique, the property is what has to be unique to require a variance. I haven't heard a sufficient example. I think the hardship issue is an important issue. We can achieve an outdoor seating that's required by the bistro on top of the building within this incredible structure they have presented here without the isinglass, or even, as many restaurants have, just outdoor seating that isn't enclosed. So I don't see a hardship. Now, I get the financial hardship. They have a beautiful restaurant. They have seating inside. It can be used year-round, and the revenue would be significantly impacted by that. But the revenue and the profitability of a company or a business is not a factor we can consider. All we can consider is there's an ordinance the way it's written. We have to enforce that ordinance. We have to support that ordinance, or we have to have a legal, reasonable representation of why that ordinance cannot be followed, and then use that as a means to do a variance. And we have yet to be provided something that allows us to say, this is so unique in a vacuum that it separates itself from everything else in the city, and that's the criteria. And the justice to your neighbors, I mean, the justice to you seems obvious. We have it, we can maintain our business, it'll be more beautiful for the city, it'll be more beautiful for us, and we'll continue to profit the way we have with this non-conforming structure. But that isn't something we have to consider. The justice is to everyone else. And there are bistros, there are restaurants, they all would like year-round indoor, outdoor space that the ordinance doesn't allow for. So for that reason, I can't support the motion. We have a motion to approve. Can we please call the roll?
Peter Aldo,
Yes.
Kevin Hart,
Yes.
Eric Morganov,
No.
Ron Reddy,
No.
Carl Kona,
No.
Jason Canvaser,
No.
So we have a 4 noes, 2 yeses, so the motion fails. So we need a new motion. Do we have another motion? Mr. Cohen, please.
I'll make a motion for Appeal 2504-225 East Maple to deny the request for the outdoor enclosure and additional seating. We were not presented with unique conditions of this property that would require enclosure. Little enforcement of this would not result in unnecessary hardship for enclosed outdoor, for outdoor seating. The granting of this is contrary to the spirit of the ordinance, which is to provide outdoor seating and engage the public in the right-of-way, and this would be basically separating them and just providing more space for the restaurant itself. And it would basically would be an injustice to the surrounding property owners that have bistros and are not able to provide enclosures and additional seating, which I'm sure they would all want to do. So for those reasons, I request to deny this appeal.
We have a motion to deny the appeal. Do we have a second?
Mr. Chair, I'll second
Do
the
we have a
motion.
second? Do we have any discussion about this particular motion? Seeing none, can we please call the roll?
Carl Kona,
Yes.
Ron Reddy,
Yes.
Peter Aldo,
No.
Jason Canvaser,
Yes.
Kevin Hart,
No.
Eric Morganov.
No, or excuse me, yes on the denial. Sorry. That's 4 to approve that motion. I just want to say, I think what you've designed here is beautiful. I hope that everything you've drawn, notwithstanding the enclosure, is built and approved, and I think that you'll thrive. And I think what you're trying to accomplish, I understand, and I wish that the ordinance allowed for you to have what you're asking for, because I think it would be amazing, but the ordinance doesn't allow for it, and that's all we're really able to look at And in that particular case, I'm hoping social will thrive in the city as long as any other restaurant. We just didn't have enough criteria to be able to give you a variance. Our next case is case number 2505 for 774 Lakeside.
Mr. Chairman?
Sir.
I need to recuse myself for this next case.
All right, anybody have any questions for Mr. Hart about why he needs to recuse?
Sorry, Nick.
Seeing none, you're recused. Thank you.
Do we need to give the petitioner opportunity?
Yeah, I probably will.
I think that should be before we hear it, give them that opportunity.
Yeah, before we hear from
The petitioner for 774 Lakeside. So you can see that Mr. Hart has recused himself because I'm guessing architecturally he's involved in your project. You can see we only have 5 board members. If he recused himself and we had a full board, you would have 6 members. You need 4 approvals, as in the last case, for a variance. So now with 5, you have to get 4 out of 5. If we had a full board, you would have to get 4 out of 6. So the question is, would you like to postpone a month? That doesn't mean that next month we will have the number you need, or do you want to move forward? Very good. You'll be next as soon as we get the city. Yep, thank you.
Jeff Zilke here to present case 25-05, property known as 774 Lakeside. Request the following variances for a single-story rear addition and a second-floor addition. Chapter 126, Article 2, Section 2.06.2 of the zoning ordinance requires that our maximum lot coverage is 30% of the lot in a residential zone. The required amount for this lot of 30%, it would be 3,372.90 square feet. The proposed is 33.1%, which is 3,721.80 square feet. Therefore, a variance of 3.1% is being requested, which is 348.90 square feet. Variance B, Chapter 126, Article 2, Section 2.062 of the zoning ordinance requires that the minimum rear yard setback is 30 feet. The existing rear yard setback at the garage is 10.70 feet. The proposed is 20.90 feet for the mudroom addition on the first floor. Therefore, a variance of 9.10 feet is being requested. Variance C, Chapter 126, Article 2, Section 2.062 of the zoning ordinance requires that the minimum rear yard setback is 30 feet. The existing rear yard setback of the existing home is 24.25 feet. The proposed is 24.25 feet for the second floor addition. Therefore, a variance of 5.75 feet is being requested. The applicant is seeking variances to construct the single floor addition, which is the mudroom, which is right here, and then a second floor addition over the existing house that is shaded here. So the existing garage, as I mentioned in the first variance, was at 10.75 feet to the property line. The mudroom is the 20.90 feet, therefore a variance of 9.10 feet to add the mudroom. And then going over the second floor, that is at 24.25 feet for a variance, a request of 5.75 feet. Any questions?
So, Mr. Zucchi, typically when someone is adding to their nonconformity, they're typically adding it over or near an existing structure, but it looks like the mudroom addition does not go any further into the rear than the existing, whatever that structure next to it is, garage or...
This is actually the attached garage.
The attached garage. And then the other new structure is built over the existing structure, so all of the nonconformity is consistent with the existing nonconformity. They're not adding any nonconformity.
Correct. The new additions, there is a nonconformity that's being added, but it's not magnifying the existing nonconformity of the existing garage.
Right. Very good. Other questions for Mr. Zucchi? Mr. Connell?
So the Part A of this, the percentage of lot coverage, that is due to the mudroom?
Correct.
Okay. So if they took the mudroom out, A would be removed?
I'm not 100% sure. I think there's a tad bit overage on it, but yes, it wouldn't add to that overage with the existing being built over that existing second floor portion.
Thank you.
Mr. Zicki, what else is involved with lot coverage? Is there anything to offset for the mudroom? That isn't, or is it only apply to structure? It doesn't apply to pavement, right?
It doesn't apply to the pavement, but this is the actually rear portion of the house. So some of all this decking, since it's not behind the house, kind of gets considered in as lot coverage, even though it's a deck.
That's why I want to describe all the things that impact lot coverage, yeah.
Other than that, not being behind the rear yard, because the rear yard is actually lowered at the 10.7. There's not a whole lot that could be removed, unless they remove the deck, pulled it back to accommodate or in some fashion mitigate some of that decking to get rid of that, the additional 347 square feet.
And is that 347 the full square footage of the mudroom, or is that on top of other overages that are existing in the existing home? I don't think that mudroom isn't 348 square feet, right?
No, because this deck portion actually running down between that and the mudroom addition is what's putting it over.
And on this site plan, I see some kind of, almost what looks like decking where the mudroom is going. Is there decking that's being removed? Looks like they have to move the AC unit too, right? That's another, this is the version where you don't see the mudroom. No? Yeah, there you go. So was there a deck there and then the AC is moving for that mudroom?
The existing AC is back there already. I don't think it's moving too far.
Okay.
I'll let the appellant speak of it. And I believe that the shaded area is either a slightly deck or an overhang.
Overhang, right. All right, very good. Any other questions? Mr. Kona?
So the front porch is being added, because right now the front door just steps down onto the pavers. So that's going to be a raised front porch now? Is that?
Over here?
Yeah, so if you go to the new one, that's all one, yeah. So is that part of it, or is that part of the front porch allowance?
You got me stumped a tad bit. No, because that would still be lot coverage being in the front, so that wouldn't have affected that percentage. Because with it being paved already, it's not in the required front yard. If that makes sense.
No. So we're looking at total lot coverage, and currently the current front, the right just left of where your hand is, that there's steps down, and now the new plan is what you're showing there, where it covers the whole entire opening there. The little nook is now raised and covered, right?
Yes,
So
unfortunately, I don't know that answer. I'm assuming, I'll let the appellant speak of it. I'm sure that there's some of that square footage falls within that. I'll let the appellant speak of that.
Okay, and one last question. So I think the chairman referenced this, but from what I could gather, the new plan where that mudroom exits, they're basically putting the garage door right next to where the AC unit is, instead of, right now it goes into the, if you go up. Yeah, so they're moving the door, so that's, yeah, the door is right where your hand is now, and they're moving it now to the other side. So right where your hand is that new decking, or is the whole deck getting replaced?
This right here is a whole new enclosure creating the mudroom. And it's just
Opening
shaded,
onto
it's
the
just
deck.
shaded in to show, here's the addition portion.
Yeah, that was my question, I'm sorry. So that's opening onto the existing deck, or they're going to make it, they're rebuilding
It's
the deck?
actually going to be a heated mudroom inside space. They're putting a roof over it and everything.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misspoke. That whole room is now going to be on the same level as the deck, and you're going to walk out onto it, or is there a new deck replacing the existing deck?
Yeah, we can just ask the petitioner maybe?
Sure.
Yeah.
Because it's still going to be the same amount of lot coverage either way. But you can see they have some kind of Nana system or French doors that open up to the deck too in the new version. The actually old version is on here if you scroll for it. It's page 73. I was looking for it. Jeff, we can just ask the petitioner.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Zucke? Seeing none? It's your turn. Should give us your name, your address, and then tell us why you believe this variance is appropriate.
Okay, hi. My name is Eve Hadley. My address is 462 Pilgrim in Birmingham. Dear members of the board, thank you for your review of this variance request. The Fracassa family residence is an existing non-conforming home located at 774 Lakeside Drive in Birmingham. The home was originally built in the 1940s, and its construction preceded the existing ordinance by several decades. The current house is a legal non-conforming structure with encroachments of 1 foot 1 inch into the front setback and 19 feet 2 inches to the rear yard setback. The current lot coverage is also non-conforming which is at 30.6% lot coverage at 0.6 above the allowable 30%. The Fracassa family is proposing to build an austere 794 square foot addition to their home. The first floor addition is 78 square foot, the mudroom. It's a safe entryway into the house from the garage to the mudroom. The existing entry does not allow safe egress to the garage and out of the house with the very narrow 18-foot width of the garage. The second floor addition would construct a new 716 square foot master suite directly above the support walls on the first floor below. The proposed construction will not extend beyond the current lines of structure. The design sensibly stacks the new walls over the existing walls below seamlessly. It was determined that the new structure would not build 5.75 feet outward to the west because the high coffered ceilings in the existing library below. It's part of the original home, and the construction above would require substantial demolition of that existing library ceiling and roof structure. The unique circumstance for the house is its age. The home is an existing nonconforming structure. The nonconformity was not self-created. The proposed addition is a sensible approach to enlarging the structure without adverse effects on the neighboring properties. Forcing the homeowners to adhere to the rear yard setback requirement would create an undue hardship with a complicated structure that would require an expensive, disjointed, and improper geometry. The proposed addition would be harmonious to the existing structure and would appear to have been part of the original construction. It would not be visible with the positioning of the new structure at the back of the home. The work will be attractive to the homeowners and to the neighbors. The mudroom entry addition would provide safer access and egress to and from the narrow width garage in the house. The Fracassa family respectfully requests relief from the 30% lot coverage requirement with a 3.1% variance due to the first floor mudroom extension, which is variance A, a first floor rear yard dimensional setback of 9.1 feet for the mudroom, that's variance B, and a second floor rear yard dimensional variance of 5.75 feet, which is variance C. Thank you for your consideration for these three parts.
Thank you. Mr. Zucke, quick question. So back to this mudroom, it's 78 square feet, is that accurate? So they're asking for over 300 square feet of, 348.9 square feet of variance. So is the rest of the square footage existing non-conforming overage?
Yes, because the existing deck, since it's not behind, I'm going to say about 3 years ago, since it's not behind the house, a structure that's raised up, this becomes all existing non-conforming over lot coverage.
I just want to understand that the
So it's
mudroom
kind of-
addition is not a 348 square foot request. It's it's a 78 square foot request.
Correct.
All right, so I guess let's start with that. I'm looking, can you go to page 73, which shows the current layout? That's 73 for me at least. There you go, and zoom into the existing laundry room.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to understand the hardship as well as you're asking to take a non-conformity and go even more conforming with this mudroom. And again, it's only 78 square feet, but I know I see a mudroom, laundry room combination. You know, I see the kind of entrance where you come in a typical home of this age. I see the ability maybe to have a door come directly into the laundry room from the outside if that's what you want to achieve. I'm just trying to figure out the basis for a variance to add a small mudroom to achieve what could be achieved here. Or are you willing to maybe, or is because you're not the applicant from the standpoint of you're not the owner.
Correct.
Are they willing to maybe, because you still have an overage regardless, but maybe mitigate by removing 78 square feet of the deck?
So the hardship, what they're trying to fix is that egress for the door that goes from the garage into the home, like in front of the step. It's such a tight.
Jeff, can you put your hand on the garage entry door? Yeah, that one right there, okay.
That door. So it's such a tight, it won't open all fully with both cars in the garage because the garage is so narrow. It's 18 by 20 feet. So that's kind of the dangerous situation. They can't get out in emergency, and you'll have to move the hand. So that's what they're trying to fix with this small mudroom.
So by entering from the other side, by extending the mudroom, you achieve that. I get that.
Yes.
Again, I think we all have these challenging, my last house in Birmingham, I walked from my garage into my family room, directly into my family room. So just kind of the nature of the beast. But knowing that we're expanding the nonconformity, even though the whole property is over on the nonconformity, is there any ability for your client to mitigate by taking out, because again, it is only 78 square feet, so we're talking about call it 8 by 10. I'm just curious, because although I see how it would help, at the same time, I'm sure there's dozens of improvements in the home. So that would be my first question. And then the other is, do you know, or was there any exploration of building the second floor structure not on the outside walls, but stepping in to try to reduce the nonconformity? Was that considered?
The nonconformity.
The addition over the first floor.
With the setback, from the setback standpoint?
Correct. Well, the setback and also just because
Just making it smaller?
Exactly.
I believe it was considered, but the setback is a separate issue.
Right.
My understanding, and maybe we'll have to come back next month, but my understanding was that the deck itself was not part of the lot coverage issue, and that this extra, well, maybe it's the whole thing. I'm sorry. I didn't believe it was the deck, but it just felt like 78 square feet was a small consideration to get rid of the safety hazard, because the door is not able to open all the way into the garage. I'm sorry, I don't have an alternative.
Yes, I went to the question about the second floor expansion. Was there a
Yeah.
consideration? You just said, yes, there was a consideration, but they decided not to step in. Do you know the reasoning why they didn't?
Why they didn't decide to stack it, I don't know, I'm sorry.
That's fair. That's all I need.
I don't know.
Any other
I'm
questions?
not exactly positive.
That's fair. Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, I don't understand how moving the door from one of the side of the corner to the other side of the corner, if the car's in the way there, how does opening it from that wall allow the door to open?
Can we look at the other?
The new
Hold
version?
on, let me get my drawing here.
Because it swings in.
I'm too nervous.
Don't be nervous.
Don't be nervous.
So see how it swings into the mudroom?
Sure.
So it's not going to hit their car or have any issues on the inside of the garage. They have two small vehicles and it's a tight fit. So they're able to go into this new space, swing the door in, and not have a potential dangerous situation in the existing house when the door swings in, going down the stairs. That's kind of also a not best practice. So that was solving this problem with the stairway and the issue with the egress into the garage.
So by turning the door around, by turning the door around in the existing location, you said there's a problem with the stairs?
Currently, the door swings into the garage.
Correct.
Right? And that, they are not, with a car parked there, the door is not able to fully open
Right.
because of, problems.
Right.
If they switched it, then there would be it would just be a safety issue with stairs. It's not gonna, it would open completely, but it's just a safety issue. It's not a best practice to have a stairway and a door that swings into it.
I mean, I just think of most foyer entryways, stairs come down, it's right there at the, there's like a landing, and then there's the front door, and they all seem to swing in. I'm just trying to understand what the safety issue was.
The current one is just,
And that isn't the stair that goes down, that's the stair that goes up. So it's not a safety of falling down the stairs, even though it looks like it's 6 feet away. That's the stair going up, correct?
no, it's the stairway going down.
There's,
It's not into the basement, it's up, yeah,
Yeah.
that's correct, it's to the second floor.
Up to the, it goes down from the second floor, but it's not a staircase you could fall down if you were too close to it.
Correct, like into the basement, I
Right.
see what you, yeah,
Right.
yeah, the cellar,
Right.
correct.
thank you.
Mr. Reddy, you had a question?
Yes, so I just want to make sure I understand correctly what you said earlier. You have not discussed with your client mitigating these, particularly the surface area. I know the setback's a little more difficult to achieve by reducing the size of the deck, which would at least eliminate the surface area question.
Correct. I mean, I'm not aware of the discussions to
Okay.
do that. I believe the deck is being, yeah. I don't have a 100% answer, so I can't answer that.
Because that would be a mechanism to help
Correct.
at least part of the issue. I mean, you're also asking for a second edition, which I think is variance C, but that's over a pre-existing non-conforming entity. That's a little harder. That's a little easier to understand. I am having some trouble with the mudroom just because I think it could be mitigated.
Correct.
So that might be something you may want to consider.
Come back for it. Yes. Agreed.
Well, hold on. So I guess my first question is, would you like to maybe review some of this with your, I'm going to say client for lack of a better term, or would you like to keep proceeding?
I don't have enough experience to know if it's better for me to come back next
Well,
month.
you've heard so far a bunch of us ask about
Yeah, the mudroom
mitigation,
and the
because we've got a
mitigation for the-
nonconformity, you're adding a mudroom.
Correct.
You're referencing the swing of the door as a means of why you need the mudroom, but we're kind of saying, except for your perception of best practices, that there are other options. And if there are other options, then it is,
Said it,
yeah, so, I mean, I'm open to you saying, can I postpone and come back next month with more of these? And maybe I can explore with my clients where we could reduce the deck, to go back to Jeff and say, maybe I can eliminate this variance request, this A, let's call it, completely.
Agreed. It's not like you can vote on B
I
and
can,
C and A.
But
I
if we
come back
deny
on.
A, you can't come back for A.
Okay, then I'm going to have to respectfully request to come back next week.
Very
month,
good.
Excuse me. Sorry about that, guys.
We have a motion to postpone?
Adjourn.
Adjourn? Mr. Reddy?
Mr. Chair, with regards to, let me backtrack here for a second to make sure I get the right address and the number here.
774. Yeah.
Give me one second. Okay, with regards to Appeal 25-05, the property known as 774 Lakeside, based on what we've heard tonight, I would make a motion to adjourn till next month to allow the appellant to get more details from her clients with regards to what they would be willing to consider with regards to mitigating the variance requests.
And you heard some of our proposals, maybe go back to the city, say what constitutes lot coverage, is there a place we can get rid of 78 square feet, remove that request?
Yep.
Or do you want to just shoot and see if you can get it? We have a motion to adjourn till next meeting. We have a second? Mr. Kona, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? You have your adjournment.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you next month. Our next case is,
Someone's got to grab Kevin.
oh yeah, we have.
Hey, Kevin?
We love Kevin. Kevin, we adjourn to next month. We had a few questions. Our next case is case 25-06 for 1408 Villa. Sounds very Tuscan.
Right?
Please.
Jeff Zilke here to present case 25-06, property known as 1408 Villa. Request the following variance to construct an addition to an existing non-conforming home. Chapter 126, Article 4, Section 4.03D of the zoning ordinance requires that accessory structures shall not be closer than 10 feet to the principal building located on the same lot. The existing is 6.67 feet. The proposed addition is 5.83 feet. Therefore, a variance of 4.17 feet is being requested. The applicant is seeking a variance to construct a rear addition to the existing non-conforming home to a home that was constructed in 1946. So if I zoom out a little, existing garage, there's a bay window. They are proposing to build a squared up dining room, and the existing dining room going out, I'm at 5.7 feet away. Therefore, the variance of 4.17 feet is being requested. And any questions?
So Jeff, we're looking for a variance of 4, but in reality, the existing nonconformity already exists, right? So we're looking for less than 1 foot relative to the.
So you got to be 10 feet away, so it's existing non-conforming, so you're not 10 feet away, so that's for the 4.17 feet, because you're only 5.7 away, so it's 5.83 feet away, so that's where the 4.17 feet is. So the existing house is, let me zoom in a little bit.
Yeah, could you do that?
So at 6.8 goes to the corner of the house.
Right.
They're actually looking at putting the rear addition to it. And the existing house is 6.8 by going out in the rear. You're at 5.7, so 5.83 feet away. So it's actually getting a little bit closer as they're running that line out, not necessarily the corner of the house.
So you can't take a foot out of the structure and not need a variance. This is about how it's measured.
Correct, because it's required to be 10 feet away. And if it was just existing as it sits, it's 3.4 feet of a variance of the existing condition being away from the detached room.
And are these lots in particular, I mean, it looks like, is there any other issue in terms of like fire code or the ability to walk past this dining room and the garage to get there? Like what's the basis?
Our ordinance says the accessory structure's got to be 10 feet away from the principal building. It's not necessarily a fire code, but it's a requirement in zoning ordinance.
All right, very good. Any other questions for Mr. Zilke? Mr. Kona?
Jeff, if they flipped this addition, so put the deck where the dining room is and the dining room where the deck is, or, just move things away enough that they can put the addition outside of that, they would still have a non-conformity, but a much smaller one up to the house? Or does the deck constitute a structure?
So, no, because this principal building needed to be away from the accessory structure. If they moved that dining room, flipped it with the deck, and it didn't affect that bay window and that wasn't touching, that would have been an existing non-conforming that exists, and the new addition further down wouldn't be a variance requested because you would be 10 feet away from the house. from the garage.
Okay, so even though they're doing an addition to the house, is existing nonconformity, they wouldn't need a variance because it's
If
not
that
being
area
changed?
wasn't touched.
Okay, thank you.
And there's no way to deal, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, please, go ahead.
Oh,
Please.
thanks, Mr. Chairman. Back, Mr. Zilke, back when it was still BOCA, before the Michigan Building Code came in, the MBC, if a detached structure was less than 10 feet, it needed to have a 1-hour rating on both sides of the, like the garage wall would have a 1-hour rating, and the living wall, the dining wall, would have a 1-hour rating if it's less than 10 feet of distance. That was an old code that was not really melted into the MBC recently. My question is would that be a consideration to make this more desirable to approve since it's less than 10? Because the BOCA used to have it. I don't think that used to have an exception if you were using a 1-hour rated wall system. Now I don't think the MBC covers it. Do you recall, or do you have any?
With the BOCA, I don't know if that's where the
It's a
zoning
long
may have
time
came
ago.
in with the 10 feet. I don't know. 100%.
You're going back to the 90s. I know, yeah.
I remember that too, but
Yeah.
we'll say that it's still covered in the Michigan Residential Code. If they were granted the variance and they put that addition back there, that garage wall would have to be fire resistance rated, not the living wall anymore.
Oh,
But
okay.
the garage wall would have to be.
Okay. Thank you.
And Jeff, if they shifted this, and I think it ties in with Mr. Kona's question, but if they shifted the garage over 1.5 feet, where they had an offset off the kitchen wall, then what would stop them from doing that?
I'll let the appellant speak of it, because I know through some discussions, it's just the layout of the house.
Right.
If it was moved over, to answer your question, and along with Mr. Corona, the existing was still non-conforming, but without touching it, that corner of the house, it was away from it. The new addition, if it was the 10 feet away, they wouldn't be in front of you tonight, because it would have been an existing non-conforming.
Right.
Because the garage is existing, it's just the addition to the rear of the house.
Right.
It's creating that problem.
All right. Any other questions? Seeing none? Who's coming up to speak?
Good evening, gentlemen. Another existing non-conforming tonight, so why not roll?
Story of our lives.
Exactly. So you kind of pointed out, right now, it's already 6'8" non-conforming. There's a bay window.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Dominic Tringali, I'm the architect for the project, 3005 University Drive. Thank you. So we did look at, as you can see that bay window that's there, we did look at moving it over a foot. Will it still be non-conforming? But the problem is, it's just going to be poor construction, and we prefer not to do that, and we prefer to keep it straight. So right now, it is at 6'8". The garage, would be a hardship for us to move that, to try to get that. We're simply adding on this dining room addition and bedroom above, adding on the mudroom. We meet all the other requirements. We meet lot coverage, we meet setbacks, we meet the height requirement, we meet everything. It's just this garage that has kind of caused us this issue, and that's what. So.
I think the challenge is that 10 feet's required, you're non-conforming at 6.8. At least if you came in and said, I want to maintain the 6.3, whatever that distance is. 6.8.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever that is, if we're going to try to maintain that. And it's clear that this whole design was, trying to avoid being too close to the garage, because there's really no way to, that was probably the furthest they could get out without,
Correct.
getting closer, because as soon as you're aligned with the existing garage wall, you just can't get far enough away from it. It's just that from at least my perspective, there is an option, even if it isn't a great option. And of course, you could come in for a variance that says we're at 6.8, we're staying at 6.8. It's just hard for me to, notwithstanding I agree that architecturally it makes the most sense to come off that wall.
You're exactly right. That's why we are here tonight. We actually can do that, and that would be our next option. It just doesn't make sense And architecturally and construction-wise, that bay is already a foundation there, so now I got to work about that. It really doesn't make sense, but we actually could do that, and we can go back, I can move it over and not encroach anymore, but it's not affecting anything, it's not a fire situation, we can put the firewall on the garage, it's not an issue. So, and it really doesn't affect any of the neighbors or any of the other setbacks.
Right.
So it's really more of a common sense approach than anything else. Construction-wise, it'll be easier for us, cleaner for us, and it'll all kind of flow. It's a cute little cottage, we want to keep the intent of that, keep the intent of the neighborhood, and if you look at the other elevations, it kind of, we're really keeping it in its same flavor and vein.
I wish there was some way to angle or do something, there's just no.
I know.
Right.
I
All right.
tried.
I get it. Questions for Mr. Tringali? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
In the audience or online or Zoom or by phone, anyone have any comments about this appeal that's not directly associated with this appeal? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Board members. Mr. Hurd, have any comments on, or any thoughts on this particular appeal? You know the
Yes,
struggles,
Mr.
you know the
Chairman,
struggles of the
I do,
architect.
yes. Yes, I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to, with regards to the address 1408 Villa, appeal number 25-06, I'd like to make a motion to approve. I think that the applicant has shown a reasonable addition to a house, an existing home that's got a lot of, as was mentioned, it's an existing non-conforming, which is a hardship. I think that the applicant has indicated a sensible and reasonable request for this variance. I would add that if there was any consideration for the less than 10 feet, that we would apply a 1 hour rating I think the 1 hour rating to the living space would be more valuable than to the garage space. I think if we just added that caveat, I think that would, that requirement on that, the adjacent wall to the, that's closest to the garage, if that wall were a 1 hour rated.
I don't know that I want to tie it to something that implies we're making an assurance one way or the other. I would say whatever the city requires, they will have to do, but I don't think we should make decisions about what's functional and not functional for fire rating as if that's, I mean, you may know from your field, but.
Yeah, I could strike that. I think that'd be something that I think the building department.
Yeah, they have to make that decision.
That would be in their, you're right, I'm overstepping my, I'm out of my lane.
I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. I would like to strike that portion of my motion, and I'd like to tie it to the existing plans and documents provided.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Please.
I do think this is a close call, but as Mr. Hart said, this is a small home on a small lot, with very little room to roam here, and for those reasons, I think there's enough unique circumstances that I'll support the motion as well.
So I will support the motion. In general, I don't like to agree to a variance that adds to a nonconformity, but we already have a condition where the structure is 6.8 feet from the garage. There really is no way to expand this dining or this space, which I understand why you would do it, without having an encroachment that is greater than the 6.8 because of the way that it's angled and the way that it's measured. I don't think it's unreasonable to build this structure. I don't think it affects anybody around it, as in it's all kind of behind the house, between the deck and the garage, and it's really less than 1 foot. And if there are a way, and offsetting for 1 foot on the dining room to stay within the same 6.8 nonconformity isn't reasonable relative to how it would sit on the property, how it would tie into the house, and how it would function. So I think in this case, a variance is appropriate, so I'll support the motion. We have a motion to approve. case number 25-06 for 1408 Villa. Can we please call the roll?
Kevin Hart,
Yes.
Jason Cavison,
Yes.
Eric Overmouth,
Yes.
Ron Reagan,
Yes.
Peter Yalda,
Yes.
Bob Warner.
Yes. You have your variance. Congratulations. Yep. Our last case, 25-07 for 283 East Frank.
All right. Hello again, everyone. Nick Dupuy, Planning Director. This last appeal, 2507, it's a singular variance, 283 East Frank, to allow, to expand a pre-existing legal nonconformity in regards to parking. So the story here is this building was built in sometime, I believe, in the 1950s time, so it's existed in its current form, and as far back as we can tell, it's office commercial use for over 70 years. So that part, they're able to maintain. They're not expanding the use nonconformity here. It's still going to be an office use. Although the way our zoning ordinance works in regards to parking is medical office use, in this case a dental office use, which qualifies as medical in our zoning ordinance, does require more parking, in fact, double the parking. This particular calculation is based on square footage, whereas a normal office tenant is required to park one car for every 300 square feet. A medical office use is required to park one car for every 150 square feet. So because this is a medical office use, and because the parking requirements are more intense, they're expanding a pre-existing legal nonconformity, which is why they are required to obtain a variance to be able to do this use. They're seeking a variance for 7 off-street parking spaces total. I mentioned it's a dental use. It's a cosmetic dentist. I asked to defer any questions about the business and what happens there to the appellate team, if I may say so. But anything about the zoning ordinance, of course, I'm always willing to answer. So, Mr. Chair, I'll kick it back to you.
So I guess my first question is there a place to purchase or kick into the, the parking program, although I think you can't do that anymore, but can you just give us an overview of if parking, how could one achieve the 7 spots without a variance, I guess is my question.
Fantastic question. So there's a literal opportunity where you could tear down a portion of the building and provide those 7 spaces somewhere on the lot. But that creates a number of other problems aside from having to tear down a portion of the building. This current building is, for all intents and purposes, lot line to lot line, with the exception of maybe 5 feet or so in the back. So on-site, I guess I'm suggesting without modifying the building heavily, is out of the question. There's no opportunity necessarily, because there's no striped on-street parking, to request that street parking be counted towards their off-street parking requirements. Traditionally, we have not done that in residential settings where the street spaces are not striped. Thirdly, it's, of course, outside of the former parking assessment district, and it's a commercial use, so they don't have access to the same benefits of being able to park in structures in public lots. They could, there's provisions in our zoning ordinance to enter into a shared parking agreement with any adjacent property within, I think it's 100 feet, should that space be available. I would argue the only space would be to the north there in the apartments, and although I have not done the math, so the record's clear, I would suggest there's probably not ample space in that lot, nor would they perhaps engage in such a thing. So there's a literal way, and there are other avenues that are, I guess I'm suggesting, unavailable.
I guess, but so they aren't expanding this practice, correct? It needs 7. It's always needed 7. They're bringing in a new tenant. Is that my understanding?
A friendly correction. So it was a law office before.
Okay.
Which would have been an ordinary commercial use at the 1 per 300.
Oh, I see.
So I would correct and say they are expanding because they are doubling the amount of required parking that they're technically supposed to have.
But there's no parking for the number required for the law firm.
At this time, because it's all an pre-existing legal nonconformity, no.
So if this particular owner of the property found a new tenant and it was another law office, would they need a variance because it's a new tenant of 4 spots or 3.5 spots?
They would not need a variance because they'd be able to maintain the pre-existing legal nonconformity.
Even if the tenant or owner changes? Even if the tenant or owner changes?
Correct. If it's an ordinary office, use the law firm. I'm going to mix them up, financial office, a real estate potentially. It would not be a variance scenario.
Okay, and then I guess I'll have to go, I guess I have to hear the presentation, then I'll ask the question. Mr. Kempster, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, if they entered into a lease agreement with a private garage owner or the city that was, I think, more than 100 feet, that wouldn't count towards this?
Well, they would technically need a different variance for that. So they'd have to say, in this example, I found a parking lot 400 feet away with an owner that's willing to work with us. They need a variance for that amount of feet, however many feet away, another dimensional variance.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I'm assuming there's some, maybe very few, but some medical offices in the downtown district. Would they not require parking because they're in a different parking district, or is this a uniform rule for all medical offices, no matter where they sit in the city? I'm just trying to understand the rule a little bit.
Yeah, the only special condition is the limits of downtown Birmingham, or
Okay.
I should clarify, the limits of the former parking assessment district, which I think I'll summarize it at cutting off at Brown Street and then all the way to the north, and then the extent of Maple that you'd imagine downtown to be. So in that former parking assessment district, a medical office would not need to provide parking. Everywhere else, it's the same 1 per 150.
Thanks.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The park being on the south side, across the street, the perimeter of that park, is there off-street parking on the perimeter of that large vacant, it's not vacant, it's a functioning park, but there's a lot of on-street parking in that area adjacent across the street to the south.
If I'm not mistaken, I would believe there's only parking permitted on the north side.
Okay.
I don't believe there's parking permitted on the south side. So as you go around the park, on the west side of the park, the big long stretch, I do believe there's parking permitted. And of course, the park has a lot with several spaces in it all the way at the south end. But in this particular area, I don't believe parking is permitted on the south side
Okay.
of the street.
Thank you.
So there being no parking spaces for either of what looks like either 2 or 3 buildings there, no matter what, any use that would fit in the zoning classification there would require a variance of some sort, right? There's no use that could even go there that would not require any variance, it not being in the parking, special parking district?
I suppose I would say any use that isn't an office. So just to double down on that. So as I mentioned, the pre-existing legal nonconforming use here is office.
Yes.
They've maintained that for 75 years-ish. So, of course, the same tenant has been there for 75 years, so they've shuffled office users in that space.
Yeah.
The distinction here is the medical office part of it.
But if the use were like, say, abandoned for a year and the building sat vacant and a new law office wanted to come in, I'm assuming they would also need a variance too.
That's a really good question, and I believe there's some legal parameters here in terms of what's a discontinuance of use.
Okay.
I will at least say that the ordinance does state once a legal nonconforming use is discontinued for a period longer than 6 months, it needs to be brought into code or come here.
Okay.
But that's the legal gray area that I'm not confident enough to advise you on.
But aside from it being legal nonconforming, either it would have to be legal nonconforming or a variance would be required for any business to operate out of the building, basically.
If it were to be discontinued.
Yeah, if it was like a brand-new use since the
Yes.
the building was put up today. Okay.
Yes, and what I should say, and forgive me, I didn't say so, just to be clear, it is in the staff notes, but it's zoned single-family, R3.
Oh, okay.
So there's no, there are pockets of the city that are zoned, say, B1 neighborhood business. Although this looks and feels like it could be that, it's actually just straight-up single-family zoning. So no commercial use is allowed in single-family zone, period.
Gotcha.
So we're talking a lot about office here, but if a shoe store moved in, that's technically also non-conforming because it's a residential zone.
Okay. So, yeah, never mind. Go ahead.
Mr. Canolis. Go ahead.
Just to clarify for Mr. Hart, the space immediately south in front of the park is no parking allowed, but further west on the north side of the park, the south side of the road, there is time-limited parking. Everything else is permit parking on all streets that are surrounding it. So there's really no parking at all except permit parking there, which I question is a R3, even though it's a business, are they granted permits, parking permits, residential parking permits?
That is a very good question, and I'm going to suggest no, but know that I'm not.
I actually live very close to this, and the answer is no.
Okay.
And I think some of it is permanent, some of it's just straight up time limited, like 2-hour max parking, things like that.
Yeah, everything except the north side of the park
Oh, understood.
is time limited, but all the other, like even in front of the building, because there's residents right next to it, is all residential permit, and all the streets surrounding it are all residential permit.
Thank you.
Is there a process by which the building owners could petition the city and have parking spots added, parallel parking in front of the building on Frank Street?
I suppose. I would not be familiar with that process. It'd be a predominantly police department process. They manage that kind of thing.
Okay.
So I'd have to defer to some, they're not here, but.
Okay.
Mr. Reddy.
Yes, I noticed in the package that there was some concerns from the neighbors with regards to parking. I guess my question relates to the fact that there's a difference in parking requirements for a medical practice. This is actually a dental practice. It looks like it has 3 chairs. I mean, is that any different than a hair salon in that sense as far as the number of people that would actually be in the building? I mean, there's literally any business that you have here would require.
I was going to ask the same question. I think it's
Yeah.
something we have to talk to the petitioner about and
Okay, fair
establish
enough.
that.
Then I'll leave it for the-
Because it's medical as far as they're concerned. We have to figure that out on our own.
That's an important distinction. The zoning ordinance doesn't delineate at all. Right?
Okay.
It's either medical office and you're required this, or regular office and required that. I did ask about the 3 service rooms myself, and I guess I would like the applicant to explain it, because they can obviously better do so.
Thank you. Fair enough, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Hart?
So just in keeping with Mr. Yaldo's question earlier, if this was a retail, like right now, if it's standard office, it'd be 1 space per 150 square feet. Is that correct?
If it was a standard office, it'd be 1 per 300.
For 300. Okay, and then for this office, what is it for the dental office again? It's 1
per 150.
Okay. If it was a retail, probably the only other thing that this building would allow, what would it be for retail?
So that would require a use variance, because in other districts,
But if, say they did get a use, they got it, but they'd still need a parking requirement.
that would be my argument, because you're changing the conditions, and it's a new use.
Oh, so the retail, 1 parking space per X square feet is variable depending on where it's located in the city? Or is it always, is it 1 per 200 square feet, 1 per 150, or is it all?
Sure.
I guess what I wanted to know is, regardless, and kind of focusing in on what Mr. Yaldo talked about, anything we put in this structure is going to require a parking variance, virtually anything.
No. If it's an office, it doesn't require a variance.
That's the only
It's
exception.
non-conforming, so it doesn't require it. It's going to need it, but it doesn't require it.
So the only exception
So
is
it's
regular office.
this is a non-conforming use, so it's a non-conforming structure in a.
Non-conforming use that they're increasing the non-conformity.
Okay.
Yes, and just to be clear, the only comparable, which is getting to your point about retail, to office parking requirements is a traditional commercial retail setting. I think there could be questions about whether or not the 1 per 300 and let's call it 4 parking spaces for office versus retail would require a variance. We talked to our council and things and determined whether or not that they're able to conform with that. But they'd still need to come here either way for the use if it were to be a retail. I think the only question would be parking in your scenario.
Understood. Thank you.
The zoning, yes, Mr. Chairman. The zoning ordinance doesn't distinguish between any different types of medical, right?
It does
Just
not.
medical.
It's
Okay.
all wrapped in the same bubble.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Of course,
Yep.
sure.
Who's coming to speak on behalf of this? You can ask a question at the public discussion.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here so late tonight. We really appreciate it. My name is Omar Al-Kafaji. Address is 32,000 Northwestern Highway, Farmington Hills, Michigan. I'm here on behalf of ownership. Me and my partner, Darren Namey, are here today with our potential tenant, Dr. Tiffany Daniel. She's a resident of Birmingham, lives close by to this property. We wanted to start by talking about the building. Yes, it's another non-conforming existing use building that we're coming in front of you for. But this dental office is a really unique type of business because Dr. Daniel, she is specialized in cosmetic dentistry and surgery. She teaches at NYU. She has clients that are national and international clients. This office is not a typical dental office. You will see here there is no waiting room in this office. This office will only be open 2 to 3 days a week. The reason for the placement of the office strategically where she wants it here is because of Birmingham and the appealing aspects of Birmingham. She's bringing clients from the national and international front that will come here to have procedures done for veneers and other cosmetic, functional, rehabilitative procedures. She's not going to have more than one client in the building at a time. You see 3 chairs. One is for scanning, one is for pre-op, and one is for procedure. There will never be more than 1 to 2 max in a day patients that are going through this dental clinic. You know, with the current use, the hardship, because it is a non-conforming use that it is residential and we have an office in there, like it was said previously, we could put another office tenant in there. We have an LOI from a law firm that wants to come in here who does tickets. They deal with, once you get a ticket, go to court. They have high volume. We have a title company that's interested as well. They have high volume. This use, even though it's medical, is a specific type of use. This is not a regular dental clinic. One size doesn't fit all in the medical space. I'm an internal medicine doctor. I have urgent cares and primary care clinics, and I see 60, 70 patients a day at some of them. But we're not looking to do that here. This is completely different. She is only going to see one patient. These patients are not even going to be parking, most of them, because they're going to be staying at the Daxton or the Townsend. They're going to be chauffeured or Ubered to the property, have the procedure, and then leave because they're going to be tired after a procedure. They're not going to be wanting to drive. So really, there isn't going to be that much parking. Tiffany, or Dr. Daniel, lives a few blocks away from the property. She loves it because, she can be at home, walk to work. She has 13 other clinics. This is a specialized, high-end cosmetic dentistry office, and that's going to be the use. So in terms of, putting another law firm in here, which might have high volume because of the amount of clients they see, versus this use is completely, it's just a common sense approach. We're really cognizant of the area and hope to see a use that fits in well with the neighborhood and want to work with the city on that to find a use that everyone finds acceptable. Thank you.
So you're the owner of the building?
Yes.
I mean, like I said, I live a block away, so I'm very familiar with the building. I'm also familiar with the parking issues on Frank Street, on Ann Street. As previously mentioned, most of them are permit parking. There's 0 parking where your building is. And by the way, it's a beautiful building and it has a lot of interesting architecture. I know you've done some remodeling to the back of it. There was some challenges back there.
Correct.
I've always wondered what the use will be because, some people will park next to the park for a few minutes or to walk around with their children, but there really is very limited parking, which I assume, how many clinicians, nurses, how many people will be in the structure along with 1 or 2 patients?
It's going to be 3 people. It's going to be Dr. Daniel, plus a hygienist, plus what do you call the last? her assistant, who is checking them in, doing the scanning and taking the photographs before and after.
Right.
So 3 max staff at a time. And they'll be parking at her home, which
so
is right there.
But 3 staff plus 1 or 2 patients is 5. So
yes.
we need parking for 5 individuals, and they're not 5 people together coming together. They're 5 separate cars. And, I mean, you know the space probably better than I do. There are not 5 spots available, and we have already people saying that live around it, I'm afraid they're going to be parking where I park.
Well, Dr. Daniel lives so close that she can walk to the property, so that eliminates 1 car. Her employees can park at her home, which eliminates the parking issue. She's willing to do that. If we put a title company in here that has 10 closings a day, you're going to have high traffic here, and we don't need to come for a variance, and we can have that use approved and just have the title company in there. We really want to see something go in here that is not high traffic, and this is not something that is high traffic. The architects next door have more traffic than this use will have. And I don't know what reassurances we can provide, but we're happy to do that if there is a way to do that for this use. And we want to be creative here, so.
Questions we have, go ahead.
Yeah, and I have a few questions here.
Yes.
Number one, I guess this is directed back towards the city. If the doctor starts using her home for parking of a business, I would assume that would create other issues in regards to the use of a home relative to a business. Is that accurate understanding?
I suppose it's a little gray. So it is true that if you run a home business, there are parking restrictions. But if you're having folks parking at your home to walk to work, I'm not sure that there's necessarily an enforceable standard for that.
Okay, that was number one. Number two is, have the doctor approached the Daxton or any of the other hotels to try to work out parking arrangements? I could certainly get behind a proximity issue, like, Mr. Dupuy said, if it's, hey, you got to be within 100 feet, but the Daxton's, whatever, make up number, 500 feet,
Sure.
right? So, but they're going to get Ubered over there. So that would be a different variance we'd be considering. Has there been any discussions with any other business owners or any other places where you could meet this requirement?
Not at this time. Doesn't mean we can't approach them, but most of her clients are going to be not driving to the location. They're going to be having some sort of transportation because of a procedure being done. So, there's not going to be a car for them. They're going to be Ubered, and that's her idea. When they're staying at these hotels or other places, they're going to be Ubered back and forth safely to wherever they're staying, and even for the local residents.
So that leads me to my last question, because I know we're hearing there'll only be so many people, and they'll park at the doctor's house, and they're going to
Yes.
get Ubered. We have a specific factor, we have specific tests we have to look at. And, if this was a dimensional variance where you're looking at like a roof, like the one we saw
Yes.
before you, we could say, we're tying it to the plans. If it doesn't get built according to the plans, the city has recourse. How do we know, and how does the city monitor whether or not her patients, her staff are actually parking at her house, or being Ubered, or being taxied or chauffeured over? How does the city monitor that?
So she's only going to be open maximum 3 days a week, correct? You said? 2 days a week. So this is only going to be 2 days a week because it is a highly specialized type of procedure, so it's not going to be daily. How can the city, if the city starts getting calls from neighbors saying that there is a high volume traffic, we see issues going on, can code enforcement get involved? I don't know what the recourse could be. I'm just thinking out loud on what can be done, but we're willing to work with the city on this. We want to make it something and be creative here to come up with a solution.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We can only approve or deny what's in front of us.
Yes.
So I don't see anything in here that says, these are our limited hours, or these are our limited number of patients. I don't see anything where we can tie it in. And I think even if there was, I'd have concerns, because now we're putting on an affirmative obligation on the city to actually police to make sure that you're doing what you're representing to us here today. So I guess that's more of a comment than a question.
Completely understandable. However, if it doesn't get approved, we'll likely move forward with one of these other tenants who is high traffic but allowable uses, or higher traffic than this tenant, but an allowable use. And so it's just I understand, we have to abide by hardships and the ordinances and, find a way to make it work that works with the city and with code enforcement and other things. However, in a common sense approach, this is a less traffic use compared to many of the other uses that are allowable that could go here without a variance.
Yeah, just remember that the variance goes with the property and not with the use. So if we provide this variance, then we can't take it back. In other words, we're not looking at its current use and only providing it. And the conditional, we can't really do a conditional variance either. So the challenge really comes down to, and we've had lots of variances that have occurred in this area where the owner has committed to not allowing their employees to park next to the business, but they would park in a structure and Uber over. And the answer is, for practical purposes, employees are going to park as close to their job as they can. It's no way to enforce it. So we have to assume that whatever commitments are made won't be abided by, because it's hard to force your employees to walk a half a mile or whatever when they're rushing to get there. Maybe they're wearing high heels, whatever it happens to be. So we have to look at what's practical. And as Mr. Canvasser pointed out and some other people pointed out, there are, if the 555, for example, hasn't used their total number of spots, they have been in the past willing to lease out a number of spots that you could say is your spots. And like Mr. Canvasser said, it may be a little bit further, although it's not that far. A variance could come in to say the distance is greater than what we need, but. So that's an avenue you could explore. Sorry, Mr. Kona.
I don't know if this is for the city, and assuming it gets approved and the doctor moves in and does the 1 or 2 patients, and then a year or 2 from now realizes this is really better done at one of my other offices, or it's doing so well, I want to bring in another doctor and move it to a bigger facility somewhere else. And so 2 years from now, we have a 3-chaired dental office now approved, and it's going to be, 30, 40 patients in the morning and 30, 40 patients in the afternoon. Is that, once it's approved in that build-out, can they continue to put dentists in that facility?
Anything medical.
Yeah, so I would say the answer is yes.
Okay.
Good, because to Mr. Canvasser's point, it runs with the property. Or maybe Mr. Morgan.
Right.
Or both.
And we've talked about conditional approvals based on use, and we can't really do that, right?
I'd like to also note that in the master plan,
I'm saying I want to.
the future land use.
That's very tough to do.
Right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
In the future master plan, the future land use proposed for this site is actually to have a cafe here, or some sort of retail use. It has a specific zoning on it that the city is, the city's master plan, the planner came up with. And I think that's very cool for this, but that would also be very high traffic if we had a cafe here, and parking would be an issue.
Well, you'd always be existing non-conforming, but a lot of the new transitional zoning requires parking on site. So they allow you to change it, but they make you put your parking on the property. So you'd have to redesign if you change its purpose to make it work, because you still have to have some kind of parking. Or they'd have to open up the parking program or something and allow you to contribute to it, right? Any other questions for Mr. Yaldo?
So, Mr. Chairman, my understanding, maybe this question for the city, was that we are able to attach such conditions to the granting of a variance that we deem appropriate. I understand the issue with enforceability. It's certainly a serious issue, but wouldn't we have the ability to attach certain conditions, say,
Not to accomplish what you want to accomplish. We could say, hide your parking lot with 8 arborvitae. We could require that. We can't say you're only allowed to be open 2 days a week. You're only allowed to have 2 employees, and your function and purpose can only be limited medical based on.
Okay.
Like, we just can't do that.
That's what I'm imagining, conditions like that. Okay.
I mean, like I said, it's a beautiful building, but you do have a parking challenge, and the fact that you're grandfathered in for the ability to use it as office is probably your best use. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't explore all your possibilities.
Sure.
But, again, we'll vote on it. But any other things you'd like to say to us before
I don't have any other comments. Is it okay if the business owner says a few words if she'd like?
No, she can't.
Okay.
no. This is really about your property and
Sure,
how it gets
I understand.
right. But thank you for
Hey,
your.
thank you. I don't want to keep you guys too late tonight. Thank you.
My pleasure. Please.
I'm assuming this is public comment now.
It is. She was, yes. Feel free to come up, tell us your name, your address, and your proximity to this particular.
Yes, my name is Linda Alray. My husband is in the audience, Lawrence Alray. We've owned the property at 663 Purdy since 2008. Just to give you a sense, from our front porch, we can see the entire rear and east side of the building. While I've heard many wonderful promises from both the building owner and the doctor about how many patients they'll see per day and they'll park at her house or they'll stay at the Daxton, we all know that once you give them the variance, all those promises are out the window. They can really do what they want. It'll be up to the residents to call the police that people are violating the current parking restrictions. On my street, parking is already a horrific challenge. On the west side of Purdy, there is no parking allowed on the street. On the east side of Purdy, north of Frank, it's a 2-hour parking. And I'm constantly calling parking enforcement because cars are parking beyond the 2-hour parking maximum on that side of the street. To the other side, if you don't grant them one of the questions my husband and I have is how can you grant them the variance when there already exists no parking? I mean, it's kind of a ridiculous situation. You're affording them the opportunity to do something, and the opportunity to do that doesn't even exist. There are constantly cars parked in front of our home. I have a shared driveway with my neighbor to the south. So we can't even park in our own driveway. We have to park up adjacent to our garage so that each of us can, egress out our homes. I can't park in front of the home we own because there's always either employees or contractors or visitors or something. So we barely have parking for the people that live there, let alone people that don't live there. So while I respect the fact that the doctor lives down the street or nearby and that she is mentioning her employees will work there, we know that that's not likely to happen. But I live across the street and I know what's going to happen. The current businesses on Frank have relatively low volume guests. They do compromise at times, but generally they're able to confine their parking to the existing spots. Because Purdy, north of Frank, is Purdy and Frank, where this building exists and where the home we own exists, is on the fringe of the central business district. Parking has always been a challenge there with residential streets. The emergence of the new RH building and all the entertainment and restaurant that's going to offer is going to put further pressure because we're only 2 blocks away from that development. Aesthetically speaking, it's an ongoing traffic jam, quite frankly. Calls to parking enforcement to mark the tires are useless because it just opens a spot for another car that's waiting to move in. Our home and the neighbor already, as I mentioned, have a shared drive, which compromise our ability. What else can I say? Real estate agents have told us that the parking situation on the street will eventually compromise the value of the homes and the ability to sell and or rent them, as well as being an adverse situation for the residents. So it's our understanding, as we've heard here today, that the owner of the building is seeking a variance on top of a existing variance that already exists, and we are asking the board to please reject their request. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Please, come on up.
Thank you. Thank you for having me up. My name's John Rosso. I live at 890 Pleasant. I own the duplex in the corner of Frank and Purdy, 705 and 707. And basically, I'm a landlord around town. I'm very sympathetic to your problem of parking and all of the other things that go on. And when we rent an office space, we try to be very sensitive to what our parking usage is, or in an apartment complex. But
as was pointed out, there is quite a bit of parking during the day that goes on, and they have done some signage changes across there, but it makes, what ends up happening is people are parking on the park side. It was all-day open parking, now it's been converted to 3-hour through there. And on the east side of the street, going up Purdy, is permit parking. And the way it goes in there, we can't even really get in and out of our parking lot because all the cars are parked one to another and they come right up on our curb cut. It's just the way it is, but I just wanted to step up and say we already currently have quite a bit of parking that goes on there. And I appreciate you guys considering, all those factors and making the decision what's right. I feel for them because I understand about renting space and how important it is and finding the right person. But also in this particular case, I've been on kind of the receiving end, and my residents are concerned. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, everyone on the board we are all Birmingham residents. I live almost as close to this building as you do. To be fair, of course, to the owner of the building, they are also owners in the city of Birmingham, so they have the right to get best use of their property. But as we've said, there is really no parking for this building. They have a grandfathered 4 spots that probably don't exist, but they have the right to use their building and have tenants and do all those things. The question really comes down to, do they have the right to bring in a tenant that needs more than what they currently have? That's really what's in front of us, and so that's what we'll vote on.
We have another, with somebody on Zoom, and we have somebody else in the audience who wants to speak.
Very good. In the audience first, please come on up, tell us your name and address and your thoughts about this particular variance request, and then we'll move to Zoom.
My name is Larry Zook. I live at 662 Purdy. I'm a co-owner of the condominium that's just north of this particular property. South of our property is our south lot there, and I can just foresee problems there. If you're late for a dental appointment, if it's raining, it's snowing, you're looking for an open lot, a quick space, it's going to be 662 Purdy South Lot. And as we mentioned, the street parking is damn near impossible with the yoga traffic, or the yoga people and the park people and this and that. So I think it's going to be a difficult situation for the 662 Purdy residents to have this extra parking situation. So.
Very good. We appreciate that. Thank you.
But I do salute you guys. It looks like a beautiful spot, but also we do have to recognize too that 2 years down the road, business might change, so.
Thank you.
Somebody with their hand up.
I saw. So do I unmute them or do you?
Are they calling in?
It looks like it's phone.
They may be on their phone.
Yeah, let me see. I can't unmute them. It has to be you, I think. Oh, actually, maybe they're not mute. Yes. Is it the 921 number? Yeah.
921-4796.
Hi, someone calling in. Oh, there you go. Hi, how are you?
Oh, hey, this is Josh Block. I live on Frank Street. You guys hear me?
What address on Frank Street?
360 East Frank.
Very good. Yeah, we can hear you just fine. Please tell us your comments about this appeal.
Sure, thanks. So probably echo what most of the neighbors and owners on the street verbalized. There's already limited space and people are constantly parking and permit parking. Understand that building doesn't have very much space in front of it. It sounded like a really good idea to limit it to a couple days a week, and if somehow you could put some kind of constraints or something in writing to say that would actually happen, it'd probably be better than a standard tenant. But if you can't do that, then who's to say that in 6 months you don't have a queue of 3 people per hour coming into that dental office, and where these people are going to park. So that's a big issue for me. Thanks.
Very good. Thanks for your feedback. Anyone else in the audience not specifically affiliated with this appeal? I don't see anyone else online with a hand raised. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Board members.
I think someone inadvertently muted City Hall on Zoom.
Bruce, can you fix that?
I have it.
Oh, I see it.
I just.
We're good now?
Should be good.
Yeah, you took it off. That's good.
Better.
You want to do it?
Is there a time for comment, Mr. Chairman? Or is this,
After-
I apologize,
Yeah,
motion
after the
first?
motion.
No, go ahead, Mr. Campus.
All right, I'll make a motion in regards to Appeal 2507 for the property at 283 East Frank Street. I would move to deny the variance. And I'm moving to deny the variance because, number one, we have a pre-existing non-conforming use. This request seeks to expand that pre-existing legal non-conforming use, which would require a variance of 7 parking spaces. So this is 100% variance. The property can't provide any parking spaces. There are no literal options on the property, and it doesn't appear that we heard of any options from the petitioner. And that's part of the reason. I think there are some opportunities here to work with other property owners within the city to at least attempt to provide parking spaces. I certainly would be open to a variance farther than 100 feet for those spaces if that was what's required, but we haven't heard of any efforts today to try to work out any parking arrangements. We've heard from a number of neighbors in regards to the already say voluminous traffic volumes in the area, and I think throughout the city, traffic and parking is already a well-known issue, and this would exacerbate that issue. While there may be some special conditions applicable to the property and that this is a property that can't provide any parking spaces, I don't believe that literal enforcement of the chapter will result in a necessary hardship. Again, we haven't heard of any efforts to find parking spots or work out an arrangement. We've been given a number of verbal promises, but nothing in writing, and enforcing those requirements would put, I think, an undue burden on the city in terms of enforcing it. So I think the granting of the variance would, I think that would not do substantial justice to the property. In fact, I think it would create a burden on the public, on the owners of the property in the area, and on the city specifically. And because of that, I think it's also contrary to the spirit and purpose of the zoning ordinance. We've also heard that because this is a pre-existing non-conforming legal use, and they in fact have LOIs for the property, that there are a number of different options that they could put a tenant in this property that wouldn't require a variance. Whether that impacts parking or not, I guess isn't before us because it would be pre-existing and it wouldn't be for us to consider. So for those reasons, I would move to deny the request.
Very good. We have a motion to deny. We have a second from Mr. Kona. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Go ahead, please.
I actually am familiar with Dr. Danae's practice, and I actually think that she would be a better tenant than some of the other people involved. My concern, which is why I'm going to have to support the motion, is not so much with Dr. Danae's practice, but the fact that the variance would attach to the property, and we don't know what the future would hold. If her practice were to expand or she was to move out, then the variance would still be attached. That would be a different circumstance. And then I do not think that would be fair to the residents because of all the issues that they've mentioned. So for those particular reasons, I'm going to support the motion.
So I will not support the motion. I think if a medical practice were to come in front of us and I were to ask what type of things they could do to limit the scope of the use, like, to me, getting rid of a waiting room would be a pretty significant step. There may be a different medical user that comes along, but there's no way to enlarge the building, and there's really no way to operate this in a similar manner to a typical medical type user. And I think it is important for us as a board to distinguish between different types of medical businesses. That's something that the zoning ordinance is not able to do. I would be rather onerous, and I think the petitioner did a pretty good job of demonstrating why this class of user in this size of a building is likely to be far less intrusive than other users that have been proposed. So there might be some, what we might think are mitigation efforts from a title company or a ticket law firm or traffic ticket law firm. But if you evaluate those types of businesses based on their likely needs and customer base, it's easy to me to see why that would be a much more intensive user. And it seems unlikely that a different medical user is going to even be able to come in here and operate a more substantial business. There's not even enough rooms in the building. It's a really small building. So for that reason, I won't support the motion.
So I'll support the motion. As I said, I live in the area. Parking is a major challenge. This building does have what I understand, a 4 parking spot variance. You can hear from previous variances we've approved from nonconformities. We look at half a foot. We look at adding 10% nonconformity. In this particular case, around 3.5 is allowed. We were asking for 7. You don't tend to find us approving a nonconformity by 100%. This is not about what use it's going to be. This is not about how you plan to use it. It's simply about the building only has the number of spots it has because of the non-conforming use or the non-conforming previous parking allowance, and to increase that allowance would be irresponsible from us, regardless of what the use is. We'd love to obviously have your business in the city of Birmingham. It just, based on what the ordinance calls for, this building is not able to get that number, at least unless you find that this vote goes your way. So I will not support the motion because I don't believe that increasing the number of parking spots and substantially just doubling the spots when there are no spots would be irresponsible. No other comments. We will call the roll. The motion is to deny case number 25-07 for 283 East Frank.
Jason Canvaser,
Yes.
Carl Kona,
Yes.
Kevin Hart,
Yes.
Eric Morganov,
Yes.
Ron Mitty,
Yes.
Gary Aldo.
No.
You did not receive your variance. I would explore with the city and with local businesses, possibly the 555 parking structures, maybe even some of the apartment buildings. Maybe some of them have more spots than they are required to have. And I would talk to the city about whether they're aware of that and see if there's a process. But just remember, if you get 4, that's what you need for what you currently have. So you have to find a way to achieve more than that. But good luck. It's a beautiful space and it's a beautiful building. I hope you're able to maximize its value.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Johnson, do we have any other business?
We do not.
Anybody in the audience who wants to discuss anything that doesn't specifically relate to the variances we had today?
There'd be less traffic, no doubt.
Hearing none. You have a motion to adjourn? Motion from Mr. Kona?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Adjourn.